Good evening and welcome to the Cavaris County Board of Education's work session for Monday, June the 7th, 2021. I'll call the meeting to order, and I would like to say welcome to those that are here with us and those in the viewing audience at home. At this time, I would ask that we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. At this time, board members, we need to amend the agenda, and I would ask that I have a motion to amend the agenda to move an action item or a consent agenda item of 5.01, request approval for legal services contract, from the consent agenda to an action item on the action agenda.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Blackwell and a second by Furr. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And with that, we will move to items under number 4, starting with our report section, and we will begin with 4.01, the COVID-19 update, and I will turn it over to Mr. Brian Schultz, Interim Superintendent.
Thank you very much and good evening. So hopefully this is the last COVID-19 report that you get forever. It may not be, but we'll see. It certainly is the last one for this school year, and we'll definitely end the school year on a high note with that. So first off, just taking a look at vaccinations. We are at, as a county, and these are for all eligible participants in vaccinations, we are at 46.1% of all eligible citizens have received at least their first dose, and then we are at 41% fully vaccinated. I will also remind you that I'm currently working with the Cavaris Health Alliance, and we will have multiple sites throughout the summer that include high school and middle school locations for our current students ages 12 and up, and adults to receive their vaccination. So there'll be more on that coming out to the public here in the next week to come. So be on the lookout for that, and make sure that definitely prior to coming to school in the fall, that you attempt to get that vaccination, because it provides us lots of protections from not only just from the COVID-19 virus, but as well as quarantine protections as well for next school year. So jumping into the data, so we'll look at the 2 pages of dashboard. I think the point that I'll make here is that all of the metrics that we have identified are in the containment range. So you'll see those ranges and then how low those numbers are within the range. I'll also point out that our percent positive in Cavaris County is the lowest that it's been since COVID-19 began back in March of 2020. So it's a very positive note. And then we also will move to last week. So it's the last week of tracking data internally, and last week had only 8 staff members that were quarantined and 33 students that were quarantined, with 0 positive cases last week with our staff, and only 7 with our students. So those are the best numbers that we see. Now, granted, we only went to school 3 days last week, but even with that considered, those are extremely low numbers, and definitely ones that we want to see headed into the summer and into next school year. So with that, I will pick up. You want to pick up the next item?
Absolutely.
All right. We'll go right into looking at the forecast for quarterly forecast. And just beginning in July, these are just a look ahead at what we'll be covering in terms of our board meetings. Obviously, across the board in July, August, and September, we have budget amendments and budget items, including adopting a resolution potentially in August. And then construction items as needed. As you know, in the works that we have Roberta Road Middle School, which is coming along quite nicely. So we'll provide some updates on that, as well as updates on R. Brown McAllister as that gets underway here very soon. And then policy will be on the table the next. We have another policy meeting coming up on June 15th, so we'll have more policies to bring to the Board of Education. In July, I'll note that we have our school nutrition contracts, and those are for the foods and the goods that are provided for our students. Student fees will be in July as well. And a reminder to everyone, including the public, that our Wolf Meadow Elementary year-round school will open up July 15th. So they have a very short summer and quick turnaround to start back up July 15th. And then potential topic of an alternative accountability model to finish out July. And so I won't go through every single one, but you can see we have academic calendar coming up in September. So that will actually be looking forward to the 22-23 school year calendar. We'll get that out nice and early so folks can make plans based on that calendar. And with that, I'll take any questions about the quarterly forecast.
Board members, comments or questions?
School lunch prices, when do we do those?
We can discuss that when we talk about the contracts, but I'll have Mr. LeGrand make a note of that, and if there's any updates or changes on that, we do have some updates in terms of universal lunch being provided, so we can provide some updates on that as well, along with the school, maybe the school nutrition contracts in July.
Are we doing summer feeding as well?
Yes, we are.
Anything else, board members? Okay. Hearing none, we will move to 4.03, which are committee reports, and I'm thinking everybody wanted to move to the business meeting. Ms. Adcock, is that good for you as well? Okay, great. So we will move that section to our business meeting next Monday night on June the 14th. And now moving to items for consent agenda, beginning with items under number 5. The very first one, 5.01, has been moved to an action agenda item. So we will begin with 5.02, which is the Dell replacement cycle lease, and we will have Mr. Dane Hughes to the podium.
Good evening, board members. Thank you for having me here tonight. Our first item up is our Dell technology lease. We're requesting this to be approved, our annual replacement cycle leases for our Dell purchases to be put on the approved list for June 14th meeting with an effective date of July 1st purchase when these funds do become available. The total amount is $1.15 million. These leases and documents have been reviewed by our attorney and by our CFO. It'll be spread out over 4 years. It covers 2,442 Chromebooks, 290 laptops, and 1,080 adapters. With that, we do ask if you have any questions and request your approval.
Board members, comments or questions, and I'm going to begin with Ms. Sandage. Ms. Flackel? Mr. Walter?
How is the pricing on devices this year compared to next year? Are you getting more or less devices?
A little bit higher than what we normally expect. One thing we did on the Chromebooks is we added a 3-year lease, a 3-year warranty, because we're having trouble getting parts. So we can't repair the ones we bought last year. So we're starting to buy a warranty for them so that Dell will help us with the parts instead of us having to buy them through them, which is our highest cost option if we cover it with a warranty. So it is a little bit higher per unit on those. So.
Good, thank you.
Mr. Furr? No, ma'am. Ms. Carpenter?
Yes. Now, you may not know this yet. I know that, and I may be jumping the gun on this, but I know you took the computers back in. Do you know how many that we had broken or how many we have lost yet or anything like that yet?
Not yet, because the 3rd was kind of the final day to start finish collecting, and so now they're tallying up what didn't come in and going back and trying to reconnect with those families and trying to get those devices in and making that second effort to get them in. So we do not have those numbers in hand yet, but we are pursuing the devices and keeping up with the inventory to make sure we do track them down and do the proper reporting on those.
Do you know about when we will approximately know how many? I know last year we lost, and if we could, when you get those numbers, we can kind of compare from last year, this year, and everything?
Certainly.
If you could give us those numbers and everything, I'd appreciate it.
Certainly. As soon as we get them, we will pass them along to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Adcock?
I don't have any questions.
Okay. All right, board members. Is everyone good for the consent agenda? Yes, everyone? Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm assuming we're keeping you for the Apple replacement cycle.
Yes, ma'am. So this one's very similar to the first one, except this is for the Apple purchases instead of the Dell purchases. We're again asking for approval for next week on the June 14th agenda for funds that will become available effective July 1st. The total amount is $1.1 million, and that encompasses 1,080 MacBook Airs for our staff replacement cycle. We're asking for your approval, and if you have any questions regarding that purchase.
Okay, board members, comments or questions? And I'll begin with Ms. Adcock.
Don't have any questions.
Okay, Ms. Carpenter? Mr. Byrd? Mr. Walter?
I'll ask you the same question I did with the Dells.
They are a little bit higher because they did change models on us. This has their new processor in it, and it's a little bit different flavor than what we did buy in the past because they're phasing out the older models. So it is a little bit pricier, but same specs and everything.
So how long would it take us to replace them all that we need to replace?
Next year's replacement cycle, if funding holds true, we will have replaced all of our staff laptops. We did the front office staff last year. So this is our first wave of our teachers. And you see that it's very Mac heavy because we're concentrating on the elementary schools. They were the first ones to expire.
So it's not really pushing us back, we're okay.
Oh, no, sir, we're right on track.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Sandage? Okay.
Thank you.
Are all good for the consent agenda? Yes. Okay. You're good. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Y'all have a good evening.
You too. Okay, and next we will move to 5.04, the budget amendments, and we will have Ms. Kimberly Aldridge.
Good evening, Board. We have some budget amendments for you. We'll start with the state budget amendments. If you notice, we did get some funds for a Read to Achieve in the amount of $379,000. You can see we got some transportation funds for the early college, and we received an allotment for a developmental day. Do you have any questions on the state budget amendments?
Board members, comments or questions? Ms. Sandage? Ms. Blackwell? Mr. Walter?
Just the title where it says skilled trades licenses and title fees. Doesn't seem to, how does that match up with buses? Is that where it's supposed to go, I guess?
Well, the used sales tax is where we,
That's the source of the funding. Okay, that makes more sense. Thank you.
Mr. Burr? Ms. Carpenter? No. Ms. Adcock?
No.
Thank you. Are all good for the consent agenda? Okay. We will keep you for 5.05, continuing budget resolution.
okay, well, we have our federal. Next is our federal budget amendments. There were minor end-of-the-year changes for our federal, just to clean up things for the year end. So should I ask for questions now or at the end?
The pleasure of the board, questions now or afterwards?
After, completely after, okay. Now for the capital outlay amendments. One more page. We're recording DPI's payment for our bus lease, and we received from the county funds for the modular unit at RCCC. And then our local special budget amendments. There was some final changes or minor changes for the end of the year, but we did get this grant from North Carolina High School Athletic Association for Cox Mill High School. So at this point, do you have any questions related to all the budget amendments?
Board members, comments or questions? Ms. Sandage? Ms. Blackwell? Mr. Walter? Mr. Furr? No. Ms. Carpenter? No. Ms. Adcock? No. Okay. All good for the consent agenda? Yes. Okay. We're good.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Okay, the continuing budget resolution. This is necessary so we can continue to operate in the same manner as we have been until the state passes the budget for next year's operation.
Board members, comments or questions? Hearing none, all good for the consent agenda? Okay.
All right,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and now we will move to 5.06, policies for approval on first reading. We will have Mrs. Sue Burns. And Ms. Burns, if you're okay, I'll do what I normally do. All right. So
Go for it.
first up is policy 1720/4015, 7225, discrimination, harassment, bullying, complaint procedure. Number 1740, 40-10, 5001, student and parent grievance procedure. Number 1742, 5060, responding to complaints. Number 2127, board member technology use. Number 2310, public participation at board meetings. Number 3200, selection of instructional materials. Number 7335, employee use of social media and electronic communications. And number 7340, employee dress and appearance. Are there any comments or questions regarding any of these policies? Ms. Adcock?
No.
Ms. Carpenter? Mr. Furr? No. Mr. Walter?
Yeah, can you give me the background on the 1720 and the other one about the removal of the board statement about the chairperson and vice chairperson?
Sure, it's actually the same change on both of those, and that was a request at our policy committee with Ms. Grimsley. And what she asked for is that the board have the ability to decide if they're going to hold a hearing and not just the board chair and the vice chair.
That's
This is the
majority.
discussion that we had that I said I don't think it's good for just the board and chair and vice chair to have that authorization. I think the board should make those decisions together.
By majority?
I think the board should do it, yes, absolutely.
Okay, I just don't I'm not picturing exactly how that's going to work, but
So when that comes out to us and there's a question about should we have a hearing, normally in the past it's been going just to the chair and the vice chair and they weigh in. My opinion is I think all board members should have an opportunity to hear what that's about and decide if the board needs to hear it. So it would go out just like we normally would, but the whole board would get that information instead of just the chair and vice chair.
so we're voting.
Well,
On
you would,
whether to have a
you would
hearing
be,
or not have a
you would be
hearing?
telling, giving it an opinion whether you think it's worth it, it needs to be heard. I mean, this is what we've talked about at the last meeting that we
Yeah,
were
I'm just
talking
trying,
about.
I don't quite figure out how. Mr. Shaw, can you explain how that would work?
Yeah, I think the question you're raising is whether that becomes an official board vote by email. The current policy provides that on matters of discretionary hearings, where there's no right to a hearing, it goes to the board chair and vice chair, and they decide in consultation with the board attorney. It's been felt that that should not be left exclusively to the chair and vice chair. But all board members should have a chance to weigh in. Mr. Walter then raised the problem, are we now having a vote or do we have to wait till the next board meeting? And you'll recall at a recent board meeting that came up and as to whether there should be a discretionary hearing or not. That could result in delays if you push it on to the next board meeting. So I would say if the whole board's going to make that decision, it's probably got to be at a meeting. If you want input from everybody, you could leave it with the chair and vice chair after soliciting input from all board members. And then it's still you people making the decision, but if you hear some objections, then you can push it back to the whole board to decide at a meeting. That might be one way of doing it.
So I guess the way I looked at it is how we've been doing it in a closed session environment. We've been having those discussions with your updates, and then the board weighs in whether we need to have that hearing or not, or upon your recommendation, whether that's what I was more thinking. The initial email comes out to us, but then that's usually placed on a closed session agenda. Then we have the discussion, and we're all there, so you're hearing the same information at the same time, and then we can make a decision as a board and not just the chair and vice chair.
And that's fine then to do it at the board meeting.
Right.
Rather
But
than by email.
that could cause delays. I'm not looking at cause delays in people getting a hearing, because we have to wait till,
Well, our updates come out to us pretty quickly, so we know what's going on rather quickly. We meet, twice a month, so I'm not so sure how much of a delay that would cause.
You meet more often than a number of boards.
Right.
And if there are a particular rush on a particular situation, you could always have a special meeting just to address that if there is some hardship.
Do any other board members have any other issues with this? Okay.
I don't.
Mr. Walter?
I feel that you're right. It's important that we all be able to weigh in whether or not we need to hear something, and I think that's very appropriate.
Good. Any other comments or questions?
No, I'm just concerned how that works, that's all.
We discussed it about, we normally get the updates in closed session, so we're hearing the information at the same time anyway. But the initial, usually, we're going to add this to a closed session, comes from the board attorney to the chair and the vice chair. So I'm not sure that it would cause any interruptions. I just think it gives better communication to all the board members. Are we all good? Okay, continue on, Ms. Burns.
Okay, any other questions on any of these?
Anybody? Okay. All good for the consent agenda? Okay. All right, so we'll move to 5.07, policies for approval on second reading. Now we'll begin with policy number 3225, 4312-7320, technology responsible use, 7205, standards of professional conduct, 7720, employee, community, and political activities. And are there any comments or questions?
I do appreciate you rewarding the section I had concerns about, so thank you very much for doing that.
In addition to that, while I was preparing the documents, I also noticed 7205 was using the same phrase with proselytize. So with the board's okay, we're just going to change that to promote like we did with the other policies.
Perfect, that is good. Any other comments or questions? All good for the consent agenda? Okay, we're good.
Great,
Thank
thanks.
you. Okay, we will move to 5.08, Instructional Resources, and we'll have Dr. Crystal Hill.
Good evening, Mr. Schultz, Ms. Grimsley, members of the board. I'm pleased to bring to you tonight our recommendation for the Instructure Case Benchmark Assessment for the 2021-22 school year. The amount of the quote exceeds the threshold we are authorized to approve, which is why I'm bringing it to you this evening. We can pull up the presentation. I'm sorry, it's the other attachment. Thank you. So I just have a few slides that I wanted to share with you just to go over how we arrived at the decision to move to Instructure for our benchmark assessment. On the next slide, you will see a graphic here that's all about alignment. And so at the heart of everything that we do, of course, is the student, but it's really important that our standards drive everything that we do. So at the top, you see a bracket for minute-by-minute, daily, weekly, and unit assessments. So Mastery Connect is just a tool that teachers have in their toolbox to check for understanding. They can use Mastery Connect during the day. It's informal, it can be formal. They can use it as a PLC. But it's a really easy tool for them to use. It's standards aligned, and it gives them a quick snapshot of how students are progressing towards each standard in the content. Where you see that big arrow there is the interim benchmark assessment. We give a benchmark assessment for every EOC and EOG area. So that would be 3 through 8th grade in reading and math, 5th grade science, 8th grade science, and then our high school courses, which would be biology, English 2, math 1, and math 3. So that's what our benchmark is for. On the next slide, this is just a timeline of the benchmark history that we've used in Cabarrus County Schools. Prior to 2017, we used Discovery Education Benchmark Assessment. Discovery Education is a great company. They have a huge education arm, but they also had a benchmarking arm. And they realized that benchmarking was not their business, so that arm of their business died. So it became end of life, so we had to switch to a new assessment. In 2017, we moved forward with using, at that time it was called TE21 Case Benchmark Assessments. And we used that from 2017 to 2020. And then for this current school year, we made the decision prior to COVID to move to a different assessment system. It's called the North Carolina Check-ins, and the major reason that we moved to NC Check-ins is because it was free. And so there's a saying that if it's free, it's for me. But you also get what you pay for, right? So the NC Check-ins, it's a great tool, but it really was not the robust tool that we needed for our use here in Cabarrus County. we use the benchmark primarily to be predictive, to give us a really good idea of how students are going to do on the end of grade and end of course test, so we can intervene early. The NC check-in, if you look on DPI's website, is not designed for that purpose. So we were essentially trying to use a tool for something that it wasn't designed to do. We only use the NC check-in for a couple of content areas. We used it for 4th through 8th grade math. We used it for 5th and 8th grade science, and that's it. Because NC check-in does not offer a 3rd grade reading. They do not offer Math 1, Math 3, English 2, or Biology. So we had to stick with TE21. So on the next slide, I have a big wow there because during that time frame when we were using our TE21 benchmarks, we had some exciting data. So on the next slide, this is just a refresher of the last opportunity that we had to assess our students pre-COVID. It was the best academic year in Cabarrus County school history. So you see our statistics there that we had 89% of our schools grew more than they did the year before. 89% of our schools were above 0 growth. 0 is 1 year's growth, so 89% of our schools did better than 1 year's growth. In 2019, 94.4% of our schools met or exceeded growth, and almost 64% of our schools exceeded growth. So we had a fantastic year. And then, of course, came along COVID. We were headed in the right direction, had a lot of work still yet to do. I'm not happy until all of those numbers are at 100. So we still had a lot of work to do, and then, of course, we all have a setback. So on the next slide is what our recommendation is for this coming school year. We would like to move back to the case benchmarks for our EOG and EOC content areas for our benchmark. We'd like to continue with our case item bank that is a package deal with that benchmark. And then Mastery Connect is something that we've continued to purchase. It's all bundled together. Even this year when we went away from our case benchmarks, we maintained Mastery Connect. One thing that we will do this year is we will pick up 2nd grade through 12th. We've not historically in the past paid for 2nd grade. We left that up to the schools. They had to pay it out of their own budget. After doing our research, we found that the majority of our schools were purchasing it, so why wouldn't we take on that burden for them and purchase it at the district level for a lower price? So this is our recommendation. On the next slide, just want to break down for you, since 2017, Instructure is the parent company, and Instructure back in 2017 only owned Canvas, and you all have heard Canvas a lot this year because it's our learning management system. But since 2017, they have acquired Mastery Connect, and then this past year they acquired Case Benchmark. So it's all under one umbrella. Today we're just bringing you the Case Benchmark and Mastery Connect bundle. Canvas is billed separately, and also want to add that we received a grant this year for $121,000 for our Canvas, which frees up some money for us. So the total that I'm asking you to approve next week is $376,598.15. Are there any questions?
Okay, board members, comments or questions, and I'll begin with Ms. Adcock.
I do not have any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ms. Carpenter?
No, I have none.
Mr. Burr? I have none. Mr. Walter?
Again, if the focus is on our kids, and this is a tool that's going to really help our teachers assess our kids to hopefully hit those numbers again, I'm all for this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Blackwell?
No question.
Ms. Sandage?
I'll keep the trend, no questions.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
is all good for the consent agenda? Okay, great. All right, and we will keep you for 5.09, the SL 2021-7 Summer Jumpstart bonus structure.
Yes. And I'm sorry, it's the other attachment is the presentation. Okay, thank you very much. So what I have before you today is our certified bonus structure for Session Law 2021-7, which is our summer program. So as you all know, we are required by law to offer summer programming. Session Law 2021-7 was ratified on April 1st, 2021. And in that legislation, we are required to offer bonuses. So the next slide, please. So what I've done is cut and pasted directly from the legislation, and we are required to offer a $1,200 signing bonus to any teacher who has received a bonus in the past for reading in grades 3, 4, and 5, and mathematics in grades 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8, or has received nationally board certified certification. So we are required to do that. It goes on to say that boards are encouraged to find other ways to incentivize teachers to work during this time. The next section talks about the other required bonus in the legislation, and that's $150 for each student who is in 3rd grade who enters our summer Jumpstart camp non-proficient and then leaves proficient. So that's what we are required to do. On the next slide, I've just highlighted for you in green the things that we already have to do. What's in yellow is what I'm going to be asking you to approve. So the next slide, please. Our justification is that we've tried to provide a bonus structure that goes above and beyond the requirements of the legislation in order to incentivize multiple highly qualified candidates to ensure a continuity of services for our entire program. So the bonuses that are outside of the legislated $1,200 and 3rd grade performance bonus, we're asking for your approval on. So let's go through what those look like. So the signing bonus, as I said, what's in green is already required. What we did is we took a look at different criteria of what we would like our teaching staff, some certifications we like our teaching staff to have. So the first one is Hill RAP certified, and the second one is 2 years of blue EVOS data. So you know all of that great data that I just talked to you about? Blue means that you actually exceed growth with your students. So of course that's something that we want to incentivize. We want our teachers that are making great academic gains with our students to come work with them this summer. And blue is the highest that you can get. So we wanted 2 consecutive years of that. So that's a signing bonus of $1,200. The next slide. We didn't want to stop there. We also wanted to find an opportunity to get those teachers that were meeting growth but above 0, and that would be green EVOS data for 2 years. Those teachers that have participated in our teacher leader cohort, which is offered by our HR department, and then also those teachers that have a master's degree. So that would be $600 for the entire camp or $300 per session. Next slide. The next one is our Tier 3 bonus. So for purposes of hiring staff, we split our 6-week summer camp into 2 sessions. For students, it's 6 full weeks. But as you notice in the legislation, it talked about offering varied contracts. So what we wanted to do is offer opportunities for teachers to work 3 weeks, the first 3 weeks, and then have a break for 4th of July, and then another 3 weeks, or they can work both sessions. So this continuity bonus captures those certified staff that are willing to teach both sessions the full 6 weeks. So it's $600 for that. And then the last one is way back in February. Next slide, please. In February 15th, I sent out a preliminary email because we knew we were going to get something. So we sent an email out February 15th saying, hey, save the date, save your summer. If you want to work, please sign up. So those folks that signed up by April 6th, we would give a $100 early bonus. So that's just to give you an idea of the different bonuses that we would like to offer. Next slide, please. That's for our certified staff. Now our site directors, we have hired 22 site directors. We're offering 11 sites across the county. Our site directors pretty much act as school administrators. We had the need to hire additional folks to do this work because obviously our principals and assistant principals are busy doing the work of closing down the current school year and planning for the next school year. So our site directors are all teachers. We have a couple of deans that don't work during the summer. You have to be a 10-month employee to fill this position. But this was a $2,400 bonus. We had to bump this bonus up above what a teacher would get. If not, then we wouldn't have anybody to run the camp. They would all just want to teach. So we had to give them more money to run the camp than to teach. So these are the bonuses that we'd like to offer and would requesting your approval next week. Are there any questions?
So I'll just begin with, can you give us an update on how you're doing in numbers?
Yes, ma'am. We have about 350 employees, 3,000 students approximately that have enrolled, 2,400 of them being elementary, K-5. We are running June 7th through July 31st. The first day of camp is Thursday, and we'll see who shows up.
So can you expound on just teachers as far as the need, what we have left?
Sure. I sent an email out today saying that we need about 10 more teachers. We have some clerical positions that we still need to fill, some instructional assistants, but I feel like we're going to be okay.
All right. Board members, comments or questions? I'll begin with Ms. Sandage.
Is this specific to just teachers here in Cabarrus County, or can other county teachers apply?
That's a great question. Yes, we have opened it up to external candidates. Right now we have 13 elementary candidates, 3 high school, and 1 middle. So not too much interest from the outside, but it is open, and the signing bonus is available to any certified staff member whom we hire, whether they're internal or external. So yes.
Okay. And when you say you think we will be okay, can you expound upon that?
Yeah, so I sent the email out again. I've sent multiple emails out, and people, our site directors are doing a fantastic job recruiting. But we, like I said, about 3 o'clock, I sent an email out saying we needed about 10 more teachers, and I was able to hire 4. So,
Okay.
and my email box is full today, so hopefully I'll be able to go through tonight and hire the rest.
Okay, and my last question, for the incentives that that you've explained to us, do quite a few of the teachers that are in those positions or that have applied, do they?
Yes, that's
Okay.
a great question. I can give you very rough numbers. Right now, we have about 119 teachers who qualify for the signing bonus. 98 certified staff who qualify for the signing bonus, 98 certified staff who qualify for the Tier 2, 193 who qualify for the continuity, work in both sessions, and about 96 who qualify for the early bird, and then of course all of our site directors qualify.
Okay, I told a story. I have one more question.
Sure.
So, are any of the teachers or educators that are going to be helping out with this program, are they EC teachers? Like, how many EC teachers do we have? Because I know the group of kids are going to be primarily those that need that extra help already.
Well, they're not primarily EC students who are attending. We had to have a criteria, so the students who meet the criteria, and the criteria was at risk for academic failure and retention. And so we had a very specific criteria for elementary, middle, and high school based on data. And so that applies to any student, whether they're EC or not. But to answer your specific question, we have hired 2 EC teachers for every site. And those EC teachers will be taking a look at the students that they're serving. The summer Jumpstart model is not meant to be the same as the current school year, so the Department of Public Instruction provided very specific details on how we deliver services during the summer. It is not to be, we're not supposed to follow the IEP, basically, which is strange for us. So what we did is developed student success plans, and emails have gone out to each parent of students who are EC that are participating in our programs, letting them know the types of accommodations that we'll be giving them for them to access the content. So there's 2 teachers, EC teachers per site, and in addition to that, we're also offering an adaptive summer Jumpstart, and that is for students that are on our extended content standard. So we have students that are on a regular diploma track and students that are on a non-diploma track. So we're offering services for those students also, and that's going to be housed at Weddington Hills, Winkler, and West Cabarrus High School. At those 3 sites, we have 6 EC teachers and then multiple instructional assistants as well. We've also hired behavior management technicians to support our students.
Okay, this is my last question. Of those 3K students that have signed up, how many of those are EC?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but I can get that to you.
Okay, thank you.
So I was just curious about bus drivers. Are we offering any kind of bonuses to them for, they're going to be picking up these kids, right, and bringing them to school?
Yes, they are. We are not offering bonuses. The legislation, we're only offering bonuses for certified staff.
Okay.
So we've made the decision not to offer it to classified staff.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Walter?
Yeah, thank you. So these funds, the funds for this is coming from where?
It's coming from our ESSER funds.
Okay.
And there was a $6 million set aside for learning loss.
And how much do you expect this program to cost?
A lot.
And
I don't know the exact number right now. Kim Aldridge does probably, but it's covered. It's within budget.
Good answer.
But it is
within
covered.
budget is good. And then last question here. Obviously, other districts are competing for teachers too. What are their programs? How do they compare to us? Is
In
that
terms of their bonuses,
whatever they're what are they doing to attract?
yeah,
teachers?
I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate, but every county is doing something different in terms of their bonus structure. We've shared in our job alikes, but I really didn't keep track of what other districts were doing. We just tried to do what was best for Cavaris. And
But you're essentially saying we're down to six openings. So what we're
yes,
doing has attracted enough teachers to.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Farr?
I had questions about the bus drivers, but you've already answered it, so thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Carpenter?
One of the things, like for instance, you were talking about the directors. Now, they could only qualify for that, what was it, 2,400?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, they couldn't qualify for anything else, just that 2,400.
Yes, ma'am.
They couldn't do could they do the early bird also, or just that 2,400?
Just the 2,400. We wrapped it up to include that.
Okay, so they couldn't. Now, and I know we talked about the bus drivers. Did we have any problem getting bus drivers for that program, or are we still?
We are, at this point, staffed to be able to run buses as needed for that program.
Okay. With that, also, I know this doesn't pertain to the bonus thing, but how about the children? You said we're about 3,000.
Yes,
Did
ma'am.
we have, because I know a lot of us received emails saying, well, what about my child? What about mine? How many did we have that did not get in or wanted on a wait list or thing? Do you have any idea about numbers for that?
That question was asked of me earlier today, and I don't have that exact information, but I'll be happy to get it to you by the end of the week.
Because I know we all got a lot of different emails with that.
Well, if you get any emails, if you will send them to Mr. Schultz and send them to me, I'm Johnny on the spot. I will track it down and find out the answer.
Okay, because like I said, we did have a lot of parents saying, well, I know my child had learning loss, but I know that we did have quite a few of that. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Ms. Adcock?
Not really a question, just wanted to give you and your team kudos for getting this done in such a short amount of time. It's really fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have a great team. Thank you.
Mr. Schultz, would you like to comment?
I'll just reiterate what Ms. Adcock just said, that and special props to Ben Allred and Sarah Reeves, Mary Beth Roth, and Dr. Hill for their efforts in this. In addition to what they typically do to close out a year, they have this layered on top of that, and close out for the end of the school year is very challenging as it is, but this is work that's worth doing because it does help mitigate learning challenges that happened as a result of COVID-19 this year. So I'm very thankful for the work, Dr. Hill, of you and your team. And I know it has been a challenge, but a challenge worth taking. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I will just say, it's nice to have kids that are excited about summer school. And maybe teachers as well.
Yes.
So with that, board members, is everyone okay for the consent agenda? All good? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry. I'm just really concerned that we're not doing anything for bus drivers. I'm glad that you brought that point up. I don't know if that can be discussed or if we have the funds for it. Like, I don't know if, I don't know. I just think we need to talk about that because at least 3 of us have said something now.
Dr. Hill?
Sure, I can speak briefly to that. I do want to remind the board that you all were so gracious just to approve the supplement for certified staff, and then also for the classified staff, the 6% bonus. Yes, the 6% bonus. Thank you. So we certainly could do that. The funds were specific to learning loss, and so we presented a plan to this board that included for that $6 million, and we honestly did not budget bonuses into that. We included multiple other things that we hope to happen during the school year. So my opinion is that something special, magical, doesn't happen during 6 weeks during the summer. I'm a strong believer that what we do each and every day during the regular school years, which is most important, and this is just additional. So it would be my recommendation not to spend our $6 million all on a 6-week summer program in which all students may or may not come because they're not required to come, and spend our money during the regular school year when we can embed some very specific things which this board approved to address the needs of students when all of our students are back in session and required to be there. But certainly if that is the desire of the board, we can, I mean, obviously, whatever your wishes are, but that would be my recommendation.
Okay, I'll open it up for discussion. Ms. Carpenter?
Well, and you mentioned bus drivers, and we talked non-certified staff. We've got nutrition people feeding them. We've got custodial people feeding. Both of those are non-certified, and they're helping out. Just am I incorrect? Do we not have cafeteria people helping and cleaning people also that are non-certified that will be helping also during that time?
Yes. So
and I want to be fair to everybody, bus drivers too. And here I go give bus drivers and those people that are going to be feeding them and those people that are going to be cleaning, they're non-certified also. So I want to be fair to everybody, and I'm not, and bus driver, hey, listen, I love my bus drivers, so don't get me wrong. But if I'm going to be fair to one, I want to be fair to everybody. And again, I think Crystal has made a really good point. We're only looking at 3,000 students, and I'd rather take those dollars and be sure that I can help all my students. We're about learning, and I want to make those, I want to get the best bang for my buck. So that's I'm just making a point. If we're going to do something, I'd rather make sure we cover everybody. So I'm just making a point here.
Okay, thank you.
Did you want me to respond to the question about, so your question was, is it more than just bus drivers? Yes, we have clerical, we have custodial, we have bus drivers, we have school nutrition. I think that covers it.
So you got your maintenance staff as well? Keep the schools going?
Yes, but they won't be direct paid through this, because those are 12-month employees.
Mr. Schultz, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I think the point of the 6% bonus that the classified staff just received kind of factored into the decision as well, so that just was paid out at the end of May. So I think that, and there are some, as Dr. Hill alluded to earlier, there are some districts that have provided bonuses to classified staff, and some that have not. So it's varied across the district, and the $6 million is designated for the duration of 3 years, and so I think I think that if it's the will of the board to do that, I do think we have to keep in mind that the classified staff specifically that we're talking about just received that 6% bonus that you all approved.
So hearing that, any further discussion? Ms. Sandage? Okay,
I'll leave it alone.
all right. Okay, Ms. Blackwell, Mr. Walter,
I'm okay right now.
Ms. Adcock, Ms. Carpenter.
Well, I said my 2 cents.
Thank you, we did. Mr. Furr?
I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, all good for the consent agenda?
Yes.
Okay. Next, we will move to 5.10, Duke Energy Easement for J.M. Robinson High School, and we will have Mr. Brian Cohn.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Back in May of this year, Duke Energy approached Cavaris County Schools requesting an easement for a primary line to feed a new development across the street from J.M. Robinson High School, located at our bus entrance. This easement request is a little unique. It's strictly suspended in air. It doesn't affect any part of our physical property. However, it does cross a portion of our property that has no right-of-way or easement attached to it. So Duke Energy is required to request this easement from the school district. This property is also still under the ownership of Cabarrus County, and Cabarrus County staff will be presenting this easement request at their June meeting for approval as well. So in this case, we'd like to have both boards approve the request. Be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, we'll start with Ms. Adcock. Any comments or questions?
Do not have any.
Ms. Carpenter?
So it's in the air.
It's in the air.
It's in the
It doesn't actually touch the ground.
Okay, that was mine. I just wanted to.
Would you key up, please? Key up. Do you want to comment, keep up? Do you want to key up? Do you want to make a comment on?
No, he ain't in the
Okay.
air. Okay, all right.
Mr. Furr?
I got nothing to say.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Walter?
All for $1.
Yeah.
Ms. Blackwell? Ms. Sandage? Okay, all good for the consent agenda. Okay, you're good. All right. And I guess we're going to keep you and add Mr. Tim Louder for the recommendation and approval of the R. Brown McAllister Elementary School Architectural Design Team. And I will just begin with board members after reviewing your information that you've had and the architectural selection. I need either comments or questions or your preference. So I will begin with Ms. Adcock.
I do not have any questions.
Okay.
Okay. Ms. Carpenter?
Okay. Now, y'all had given 2 recommendations, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And restate those recommendations, please?
Those recommendations that were selected by the committee are YCH Architects and Morrisburg Architects.
Restate that again?
YCH, Yates Kreitzberg Hughes Architects,
Okay.
and Morrisburg Architects.
One question I have, are we still using the standards that we used to have a long time ago?
Those standards have been modified to accommodate today's technology and times and styles of construction.
Well, we used to have a big book.
We do still have a book.
We don't use that book?
We do use the book, yes. When we start the process, we use that as a general guideline to start the design process. But in recent years, since we've constructed so many schools, those standards have evolved, and we utilize the most recent school as a standard.
So we don't use that book anymore then? I mean, we spent quite a bit of money in doing that. I mean, when we set those standards, we said, okay, we're going to use those standards to go by, and we're going to do that. So we don't use those standards anymore?
We do use those standards as a starting point for the design and construction of a school, yes.
Okay.
When were those standards done?
When were those done?
Are you talking about the ones that when I was on the board?
Yeah.
The ones that I was on the board originally? Okay, so
2008,
we
I
did
believe,
it
2009, I
probably,
believe.
right,
So
2008.
why would we be using standards more than 10 years old? Well, shouldn't it come to the board every year for approval or some type of
Well,
review?
since I was off the board during that break, I mean, they should have been updated. It's not that they go away.
Yeah, I mean,
They should have
because
been
we
updated.
spent quite a bit to put those standards together, and that's what I was thinking, they would just be updated. And, I mean, because that all goes along with that when we did those standards. Because from my understanding, we had but all these construction companies, the ones that are being recommended, with the schools, we've had some problems, and some of it had to do with some of the standards we put forth. And that's why I was wondering, if we had had those standards in place, maybe we wouldn't have had the problems we'd had in some of the schools. And that's why I'm asking the questions that I'm asking. You know, in flooring and fields and things like that, if we had had this standard, this is what we're going to do, we maybe wouldn't have had that happen. And that's why I'd asked about those standards. If you'd went to the book and said, okay, this is what you're supposed to use, then maybe it wouldn't have happened. And that's why I asked the question that I asked.
I understand.
Okay? And that's why I
That sounds like
asked.
a question I would ask,
Anyway, and that's why I asked that. And so that's why I wondered if that nice little book was there. And like I say, we have had difficulties in some of the schools that, and one of them we know, Mount Pleasant. I have been down there. I've seen the flooring. I have smelled the smell. I've seen the ball fields. I've seen a lot of different things. And I know that has been a problem. And so that's, you know, we all know that. And I know we have changed designs, and we've done flooring different since that.
We have corrected those issues.
And we have had to do different type of flooring in different buildings. We decided we're not going to do that. We're going to do something different. And I know that we have done that.
Yes, ma'am.
And we've changed the type of flooring we've done because we did run into
We
problems.
have, yes, ma'am.
And so I'm understanding that. Okay, I'm going to let the other board members, but that's some of the questions that I had. Okay, Tim. I'm good. I'll let you go, all right?
No, I just got one simple question with the process. When y'all broke it down and narrowed it down, do y'all use like the Trago process that we use on everything down here?
Tim, we used basically used a scale. Everyone that was on the selection committee pulled down and evaluated every single 14, and then took numerically the highest 4, invited those in. Then also had another scale where we asked them specific questions, so they all had exactly the same questions.
Yeah.
And then once that was scaled, then we picked the top 2 and had a discussion about which one we fit. Like the Traeger process,
pretty
you
much
always
the
say what's the
same,
best,
yeah.
what's the bad.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
that's the only question I had.
Mr. Walter?
Both these firms have done work with us before?
Yes, sir, they have.
Are they both local?
YCH is in Concord, North Carolina, and Morrisburg is in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay, and then on this piece of paper it says, ultimately, 2 firms stood out the most for their presentation, and each were highly qualified and capable of helping us meet our goals. What stood out?
I guess one of the best things, they both have performed very, very well for us in the past. They both have local presence because people live in the county. Both of them are knowledgeable of what goes on here. We felt like that both of them they had good design teams. Both used some of the team members that we're very familiar with working with, that know our systems, like our HVAC systems, our plumbing systems, and that sort of thing. So we're very happy about having that consistency across the design side. There were very few differentiations, but just basically made the civil design pretty much was the only differentiator between the two. They have the same person pretty much on their team.
Okay, for me as a board member, I don't have a preference. And you're saying each one are fine. It kind of.
Yeah, we just felt like because of why they were the most qualified is because of the attachment to Cavaris County. Both firms have that attachment. This school was going to be very sensitive to the community of Cavaris County and the city of Concord because of where it is situated.
Okay, well, I'll listen to my fellow board members because I don't have an opinion either way.
Ms. Blackwell?
So I got the opportunity to listen to the 2 speak on their ideas for the new R. Brown. I was very impressed with the work that everyone had put in. I think that they do understand the importance of this elementary school to our community, especially can I speak my opinion on this? Okay, because I know that you weren't there for any of this and some of y'all weren't either. So like I said, I was very impressed with both of them, but one really stood out to me, and that was Yates Kreitzberg, who's I was so impressed with their just concerned for the fact that we don't have kids that are walking to school anymore because of the traffic backup, and just all of the old things that we used to have in that area that have just kind of gone by the wayside. Just making sure that we have nature trails that would be a part of the school, making sure that they're using innovative things. Now, they pointed out specifically to me magazines that they had been in just for the innovative ways that they have been using some of the materials, talking about water features and things like that, just because we have that outdoor space is so large, and not every school has that opportunity. And I was just very impressed with the innovation that they talked about. But I will also say that Morrisburg talked a lot about some things as far as making sure the current school has parking and usable, I believe they called it the queue parking, so that while they were building the new school, that they would have parking and spaces for the old school, so that they could, so that they wouldn't have such the cluster that they have right now on Union.
Correct.
And I particularly liked, I think her name is Chris, and she was presented with Morrisburg. I want her no matter what we do, because she had fantastic ideas about using like old recycled material to make playgrounds, tires, and things like that. Some of the pictures that, I'll show you this book. It was pretty doggone amazing with what they were talking about. So, but overall, my favorite was Yates, but I want to steal Chris too. So however we can make that happen, that's my choice.
Ms. Sandage.
I don't need to add anything to what Laura just said. I was there as well, and I feel the same way. They really talked about community, and I think that's really important for me. I've spoke about that all the time. And Chris, she stole the show for me. She sold it. When she finished talking, I was done. Okay, can we have her? And we'll be good with either firm. But again, I'm just gonna concur with what Laura just said.
Okay. So, yes, you may. Ask her.
Yeah, I was just curious. I know we narrowed it down to 2, and I don't remember how many you started with.
We started with 14 firms.
And how was the top 3 or 4 or whatever when y'all got when you done your scoring or whatever? How did it finish?
The number of points we scored them with, or what order were they in?
Who was 1, 2, and 3?
YCH was number 1. In the scoring system, ADW actually scored number 2, and Morrisburg was less than a point behind them.
But,
and then Little and Associates. And so then, as a committee, we went and had the conversation and discussion and debrief on the firms and what they each brought to the table. And that's why we felt like Morrisburg elevated to the number 2 spot.
It was all pretty close.
Yes.
Very much so.
Ms. Carpenter?
Yes, I have one additional question.
Yes, ma'am.
I know that Yates Kreisberg, they have done, they're working right now on, they've just finished up Hickory Ridge, or they're, getting done with that, and they're working on our middle school. One of my concerns that I have, and I want to make sure that is addressed, scheduling wise, are they able to handle this? I just want to make sure that's clarified, that they can handle that if this is awarded, or if however the vote would go, make sure that they could handle that scheduling.
Yes, so in the summary of the process that we went through that was a part of your packet, one of the bullet points that we asked them was to address the current workload capacity and their ability to handle a project of this size and scale. And both firms assured us that they were in a position to do that.
Okay, that's oh, I got a good one. Good, thanks. I think every once in a while.
Ms. Sandage.
There was one, so Morrisburg, if I remember correctly, they were able to address some traffic issues like really early on, I think in 2022, and Yates didn't talk about that. So is that something that either firm can do? Because I do know that there are some traffic issues there now that are really a bear.
Well, obviously during the planning stages of the project, yes, we want to address that because the existing school is going to remain open and they're going to have the same amount of traffic they have today and trying to work around it with construction. So even though it may not be directly addressed by Yates Kreisberg, as we go into the planning process, we would definitely want to have to, if you chose them, we would definitely have to talk about how that would work for us as far as putting in some type of queuing beyond what's existing now to help offset the fact that construction traffic is going to be right on top of all that.
So that would be a yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I say one more thing too? I'm just looking at my notes. I want to make sure that y'all all hear the same thing. So I did ask them about COVID and just have they kind of changed any of their design practices based on the fact that we've had to now close the schools for almost a year. So Yates actually said that they were talking about putting in, it's like a HVAC system though that kills all of the
It's an ionization system that's being
Okay.
put in a lot of major systems to kill particulates and bacteria. And that's becoming an engineering standard, though, kind of across the board with the most mechanical engineers now.
And we've also gone back and retrofitted almost all of our schools with it now, even our existing schools with that ionization.
Oh, so it's not that cool then, is what you're saying?
Oh, it's really cool, Laura.
Oh, it is cool.
Ms. Blackwell,
I thought
remember,
it was cool.
Ms. Blackwell, don't look at the pictures, remember?
It's true. All right, and then, and I did talk to them a little bit about, so they wanted to talk about the nature trails and maybe putting it like with the greenway. And then just on, Carol, this is big for you, so security, making sure that there's security set up for that. So they were they were kind of talking about using the natural barriers as well. So that if it was attached to the greenway, but I mean, it also is a community school, so you want the community to be able to have access to it as well. And then they also said that Shelco,
Shelco, yes, our CM at risk firm currently on Roberta Road Middle School.
Right. They said that Yates was the smoothest that they had ever done. So to me, that was a pretty big deal. That was probably one of the easiest projects they've ever had, was working with them. I'm just saying.
I think another thing to add too was that this design, or the designs that we saw, was with no help from us at all. The firms did this on their own, so these designs are able to be changed around. This is not etched in stone. So we could ask for pretty much what we felt like we needed. So I think that's important to note.
Okay, I need somebody to make a recommendation to move one forward.
Okay, I will.
Okay.
So I make a motion that we vote for Yates, Kreisberg, Hughes Architects for the new R. Brown McAllister Elementary School.
I was there too, so I can second.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. We will move Yates Kreisberg forward to the consent agenda.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, board members, we will move to 6.01, which is the Title I Federal Program presentation, and we will have back Dr. Crystal Hill.
Good evening. Again, we're excited to share with you the Title I plan for the 2021-22 school year. Before I turn it over to Sarah and Amy, I wanted to remind you of the process that we will use to approve the Title I plan. Today you will hear an overview, and I shared with you a couple of weeks ago our planning sheet that gave you an idea of our allocation and how that money would be used during the school year. The actual application didn't open up until June 1st in our online platform from the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, and it takes about 2 to 3 weeks to populate that application. and then turnaround the application is due on June 30th. So what we're going to do today is provide you an overview of our plan for the next school year. Amy and Sarah will continue to work on the plan, get it all ready for you, and then we will send it to you. And then on the 28th of June, we'll ask for your approval of the Title I plan. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Interim Superintendent Schultz. Thank you so much for having us today. My name is Sarah Rees, as Dr. Hill shared. I am the Proud Director of Elementary Education in Title I, and with me this evening is Amy Slagle, and she is our Title I Coordinator. So today we're going to be going over a little bit of the federal program and how it relates to Title I, and then more specifically, what does that look like in Cabarrus County Schools, and really sharing some great highlights from a very interesting but wonderful 2020-2021 school year. So one of the things, as Dr. Hill shared previously, that we are really incredibly proud of is the growth that our schools have made. And so certainly this has been an unprecedented year, and we're still in the process of collecting data for this school year. But as of the last accountability model, all of our schools, all of our Title I schools met or exceeded growth according to the accountability measure in North Carolina, which is a very, very incredible accomplishment. Additionally, in our most recent federal audit from the spring of 2019, they found no findings, which is also something we are incredibly proud of in terms of compliance. So as we began to reflect on the 2020-21 school year, we asked each of our principals in one of our most recent Title I meetings what they were most proud of, and really reflecting on what they wanted to continue to do in the upcoming year based on the innovation and creativity that many of our schools have really sought after to really promote community engagement as well as parental involvement this year. And so this is one of our quotes from our Principal of the Year, Ms. Dolan, that I think really captures the wraparound supports and services that we were able to provide using Title I federal funding. So what is the purpose of Title I? So the purpose of Title I, the primary goal is really to promote and increase student achievement, specifically with a certain population of students that is at risk. And so we are very intentional about working through strategic plans with our schools, identifying needs within the school improvement plan, and targeting federal dollars to be able to support in those areas. So just to give you a brief overview of Title I, so across the country, Title I serves over 12.5 million students, and primarily those students actually fall in grades 1st through 6th grade, so that's about 65% of the students that are served with those federal dollars, and another 12% are used for preschool and kindergarten programs. And it is important to note that in order to receive federal dollars with Title I, it is up to the public school unit or the school district to be able to identify those Title I schools that will be receiving funding. So how do we identify Title I schools in Cabarrus County Schools? So we actually look at two things. The first, we look at free and reduced lunch percentage. And the second is that we actually look at community eligibility status. So we know that some of our schools have what's called CEP status, and that is basically taken from agency data, including but not limited to foster care, McKinney-Vento, food stamps, SNAP, TAMP, and through that process, at least 40% of those students would have to be eligible for one of those programs in order for us to designate a CEP school. So how do we identify Title I schools? Well, first, we obviously take the requirements within federal programs, but then we also work very intentionally in Cabarrus County Schools to make sure that the process in which we identify schools is very transparent. We also work to gather community input and stakeholder input throughout the course of the year, not only on designation, but also in how our program is run and where we have opportunities for growth. And so we do that through program and budget review, annual parental advisory council meetings, as well as annual review meetings, which we actually just had today with our Title I principals. So we are required to serve all elementary schools that have at least 45% free and reduced lunch status, and at least, and for middle schools, we have to serve our middle schools at 65% or above free and reduced lunch status. So these are our 11 Title I schools that we serve, and this is in alphabetical order. And so obviously with federal program dollars, it's really important that we make sure that we're in compliance and we are following the requirements of the Title I programs. And this includes first and foremost that we must do all things in terms of supplement, meaning that we cannot do something in place of something all the other schools are doing. We have to do it in addition to. So this is providing additional services for students in our schools to make sure that our most vulnerable students are getting what they need. Additionally, we have to support the identified schools. So we can't take our federal program dollars and allocate it across the county. We have to identify in rank and serve order which schools are getting Title I funds and then what dollar amount that allocation would be. The other thing that's really important to note in our Title I schools is that all teachers and paraprofessionals have to meet state and licensure requirements. And then again, we must serve all schools at or above 75% poverty or show comparable services. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Amy to share a little bit more about the Title I budget process that we go through.
Good evening. With federal funds, we do have a budget process that we have to follow. When we receive our federal funds, we have an initial allotment. We typically anticipate to receive 85 to 95% of funds. We're proud to announce this year that we did receive 96% of the previous year's funds. After we receive our initial allotment, we do have required district set-asides that we have to set aside. Although they're set aside at the district level, they still do support our schools. After we receive our allotment and we have required district set-asides, we do allocate funds to school using a specific formula by ranking and serving schools according to poverty data. Here you can see our budget for this year. In the blue, you can see that our school allocation is 86.5% of our total budget, and the required district set-asides are 13.5%. Again, we do funnel down as much funding as possible to our schools. On the next slide, you can see a better picture of the required district set-asides. In the orange, you can see, although it's set aside at the district level, 12.5% is still set aside for school support. So programs like parent and family engagement, transitions to kindergarten, middle school, professional development, instructional support initiatives, private school participation, foster care, and homeless youth, and neglected and delinquent youth. As you can see, that little yellow sliver is about 1%. Although it's a small sliver, it's a very important sliver for us. That is 1% of our administrative cost, and that is to implement and oversee our federal program. We do have very high accountability with our federal program with compliance and finance, so that is to help oversee and implement the federal program. And as Sarah mentioned, we didn't have any findings on our last audit, so we're very, very proud of that. After schools receive their fund, they do have a school-level Title I planning process that they follow. They meet with their school improvement teams. They have a comprehensive needs assessment to identify their school improvement goals for the year. That's when their Title I plan is developed. The Title I funds are directly aligned to school improvement plans and goals, and schools monitor the success of their programs through the school improvement process and through support with district administration during our meetings that we have with administrators throughout the year. Again, we said the main goal of Title I is to increase student achievement, and the following slides are ways that our schools typically use their funds. The majority of our schools use most of their funds to hire high-quality teachers and support staff. Here we would like to just showcase a few of our teacher leaders. The first one is Miss Ashong at Concord Middle School. She is their math instructional coach. She helps facilitate math PLCs. She supports teachers. She helps them with analyzing data, helps them with delivering high quality instructional plans. And here at the bottom you have Mrs. Cobble. She is the STEM lab coordinator at Beverly Hills Elementary School, and she serves all K through 5 elementary schools delivering STEM lessons to students, and she also assists with their application for STEM School of Distinction. Can you go back to slide 21, please? Thank you. And here we have two teachers that directly serve students. Mrs. Auerbach is a full-time tutor at Coltrane Webb Elementary School. She serves all K-5 students that need additional assistance, and she has a record of success with growing our students. Mrs. Bush is a 5th grade classroom teacher at Irvin Elementary. She was hired to help reduce class size in 5th grade in order to offer more individualized, personalized instruction. A major component of Title I is increasing parent and family engagement. Although this year was different, of course, our schools still conducted family nights and events for supporting learning at home. They were able to really think outside the box and do some very creative things for our families. So here you can see a few examples from a few different schools. They were able to put together learning packets for all of our students. The students were able to take them home, and they were able to complete these activities together as a family. And so in order to showcase their work, they either met on Teams virtually, or they were able to showcase their work through social media outlets or through pictures. So although it was different, our schools did a really phenomenal job with still meeting requirements of parent and family engagement. Schools use their Title I funds as well to purchase high-quality instructional materials and supplies. Here you can see just a few examples as well. The instructional materials and supplies that they purchase are research-based, and they're proven to show success for our students to enhance their learning experiences. Title I schools also provide students with intervention and enrichment opportunities. Through this, teachers can either serve students one-on-one in small groups, either with after-school clubs or during the school day in small guided lessons.
Wonderful, thank you so much. So that concludes our presentation for you this evening, to just give you a brief overview of the federal programs as well as what that looks like in Cabarrus County Schools. So at this time, does anyone have any questions for us?
Ms. Adcock, I will start with you.
Just a clarification of why they would have private school participation in there, included in there.
Yes, that's a great question. So we are required to consult with private schools in our area, and so through the consultation process, our private schools learn about services that they can receive, so they don't directly receive funding, it's services. So throughout the consultation process, if they do want to receive services, we have to go through a formula. It's proportionate share. So it really is coming down to a student at a private school that lives in one of our Title I attendance zones. So this year we didn't have any schools that opted for any services.
One other question I had was, how often are we assessed for our outcomes versus the goals that we have for our students? Is that something we internally do, or are we required so often to have to report that?
So we follow what we do in Cabarrus County Schools. So with our Title I schools, they take the same assessments. And I would say if our Title I schools go above and beyond, it's really us working with Title I principals to monitor the success of any Title I tutors that they purchase or classroom teachers that they purchase.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Carpenter.
Yes, thank you for what a wonderful job you do for our children. We really appreciate that because you do an outstanding job. Now, you said we got 96% of our budget. How did all of our schools have to take a decrease, or did they did? Now, will you be giving us those total amounts at a later date, how much we're looking at then? Okay, well, I'll just wait till we get those then before I was just wondering how each school handles that, so
Yes.
I'll wait till that time.
We can definitely get that to you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, I have no questions. I just want to thank you for the job you do, and it's much appreciated. And I don't think a lot of people in this county don't understand Title I, and thanks for coming to us and clearing some things up.
Mr. Walter.
It wasn't A.T. Allen that had the reduction because of student changes, is that correct, or is that?
Yes, so A.T. Allen did take the biggest hit, but that's because of redistricting. They essentially lost 200 students in their student population. Title I dollars are based on a per student per student expenditure, so that's why they lost the biggest amount of money.
Okay, and related to what Denise was saying, how are we accounting? How do we show that these funds are actually working? If you say you're using the school improvement plan, isn't that the whole school level though? How does that show that this is separate funds used
Yes,
and not the school?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that we're really intentional about is each of our Title I principals receive a planning allotment sheet. They start that process actually very early on when we get our human resource allotments, because the large majority of the funds that we use are actually for Title I are primarily used for human capital. And so what Amy and I do is we work really intentionally to say, okay, if you are choosing to pay for a STEM coordinator, we want you to think about your school improvement plan goals, but then we also want you to think about creating a SMART goal. So what would this look like in terms of success in 3 months? What would this look like in success in 6 months, in 12 months? And so Amy and I both work really intentionally alongside the principals throughout the course of the year, and they actually have planning meetings with us to talk about how is the program going, not only just in terms of compliance, but what gains are we seeing, what results. So for instance, we go so far as to have our Title I tutors, we actually track the data of the small groups that they are working with specifically to be able to monitor effectiveness.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
good. And you share that between schools. If somebody's doing something great at Wolf Meadow, you'll share it with everyone else.
Absolutely, yes. And so that's, to be transparent with you, a lot of the annual review meetings and the meetings that we host with our Title I principals, it is more them sharing and collaborating and less of us speaking to them, because we firmly believe that the best practices that we have happening in our Title I schools can be replicated. And so they're a very tight-knit professional community, and oftentimes they are talking even without us, calling each other up, asking about what's going on at your school, what's happening, how can I make this work. Several of our Title I principals in the last month have even taken job descriptions of postings that they have had that they've designed based on school improvement plan goals and shared and collaborated with even the job-alike roles that they're trying to create within their schools.
I'm excited to hear that we're collaborating amongst
Yeah,
schools.
absolutely.
Ms. Blackwell?
All right, so I have one question. It's about the free and reduced lunch. So all of the children that go to Title I schools don't necessarily qualify for free and reduced lunch. But are the classrooms giving incentives for kids to turn in free and reduced lunch applications, even though they may not necessarily need it in order to qualify for Title I?
Okay, so let me just make this statement first and then I'll answer your question, okay? So in a typical year, we know this is not a typical year, but in a typical year, the two ways that Sarah talked about, either the free and reduced lunch or the CEP, we select one day in the entire year and we use that day to pull data for all of our schools. So we determine what was their ADM on that day, was there a percentage of students that are on free and reduced lunch. This year, the U.S. Department of Education basically said, because of the pandemic, you can choose the most favorable day for any of your Title I schools for ADM and poverty level, which would be free and reduced lunch. So that's why this year, when you look at the numbers, you might look at it and say, wait a minute, that doesn't match what they are right now. It's because it isn't. We picked the best favorable day in the last 24 months. Okay, so let's answer your first question. Because Mr. Walter asked a question a little bit earlier about community feeding and all of that. So as you all know, they've extended that even through next year. So when we had free meals for every student, students weren't completing their free and reduced lunch forms because they didn't need to. So in the past, if you didn't turn in your form, you don't get your free or your reduced meals, but it was free to everybody. So there was a decline in students who were actually turning them in. Well, I guess it was maybe January, February or so, they basically came out and said, when students complete these forms, this is how they'll qualify for the other services, eligible services that they would get. So the schools were asked to reach out to families and encourage families to complete the free and reduced lunch form, not for the purpose of for us, but basically so their families can receive the community resources that they would get based on poverty level. So we don't really offer an incentive that I'm aware of for students for completing their form. In a typical year, the incentive is, if you don't want to bill, fill out your form. So that would be the only incentive this year, is sending it out to all the families to make sure that we capture so they can get the proper community services that their family may qualify for.
Thank you.
Ms. Sanders.
Thanks for the presentation. This helps to put perspective on Title I, because sometimes, as you probably know, it can have a negative connotation because people don't necessarily understand it. So thank you for that. The only question I had was about parent and family engagement. What does that look like pre-pandemic?
Yeah, so that's another great question. So pre-pandemic, there was a few different aspects that schools were required to do. So not only communicating with schools, two-way communication, emails, newsletters, I mean, anything you can think of. Two-way decision-making. Another major component is increasing supporting learning at home. So our schools are required to have 2 to 3 parent engagement nights, so that could either be like a math night or a literacy night or a science night for supporting learning at home. So they would have curriculum themed nights, families, parents would come and they would engage in the curriculum together. So that's what it looked like pre-COVID. And so we were still able to do it this year. Really the only difference was it was virtually.
I'm really interested in parent and family involvement, so I don't know how I would get more information or even make suggestions, because I think that helps with our kids and their learning when we've got parents that are involved. So I'm really interested in that.
Definitely.
Would you like to?
So I just want to say thanks as a former Title I principal and former Title I teacher. Very appreciative of your work and know what that's like on the ground. I also, Ms. Slagle and Ms. Reeves, know very well how complicated navigating everything that goes into this with the federal requirements, and it is extremely complex, and you handle it very well, and you explain very complex matters very simply to us so that we can understand it well. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Ms. Carpenter?
Yeah. Very quickly, and I don't know when we get those numbers, it seems like you had mentioned, and Mr. Walters mentioned about A.T. Allen, losing the students because of redistricting. And I don't know when we get those numbers, because if it was just redistricting, it seems like then those children should have went to another school, so it should be those schools' money should have gone up some. So if you can kind of say, where'd those children go? And that money should go up. So if you can kind of say, hey, that's where that money went.
So I think the other thing that's really important to consider is the population of students that moved and what schools they moved to. So again, they would have to move to a school that was Title I, if that makes sense. So I think that that's important as you're tracking that information. Interestingly enough, their free and reduced lunch number did stabilize from last year to this year. The only difference was truly the enrollment at A.T. Allen.
Okay, are all good for the consent agenda? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, board members, now we will move to the part of the agenda that was amended to add an action agenda. So 5.01 becomes 7.01, and this is going to be the legal services contract. And there was a request to have both firms to present to the board tonight for a Q&A and discussion with the representatives from the law firms. I guess that was the last process that was used by the board years ago when Schwartz Shaw was enlisted. So with that, we're going to begin, and we actually have representatives from the law firm Womble, Bond, and Dickinson in the room, and we'll ask them to come to the podium and begin first. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Great to see you again, Madam Chair, board members. It is an honor and privilege to address you tonight. I'm Mark Enriquez. This is Sarah Stone. We served for 20 years, actually over 20 years, as counsel to the board. So we're a familiar face to many of you. And I think that's important because we handled a great variety of the issues that you face as a board. We remember the redistricting challenges of years gone by, the construction issues, employee discipline, student discipline, work closely on the policies. A lot of the policies you have are policies that we helped draft, did a lot of work with the EC department, handled construction, built a number of high schools. You've got more construction coming up. You acted on that tonight. We've done a lot of work with the Yates-Kreitzberg folks. So we've got a lot of experience with the school system. Now, some of you may be asking, and many of you were there, well, if you were there for 20 years, why did that stop? That was a question we got asked during the interview process last week from Ms. Sandridge. And it was really, as I understood it, an economic decision. The board decided in 2017 to issue an RFP, got proposals from other firms, and I think wanted to see if there could be some legal savings by shifting to an hourly rate model instead of we were doing a monthly fee to cover most of our expenses. But now, 4 years later, there really hasn't been savings. In fact, you've got a copy of the spreadsheet analysis done by Kelly Clutch. Your legal fees have actually increased every year and are now quite a bit higher than they were when we were last your board counsel. I think we bring an opportunity to come back and hit the ground running. We've got a lot of deep knowledge of the system. We've worked with Brian Schultz when he was here. We've worked with a lot of the other staff. We've worked with Keisha and Glenda in HR. We've worked with Sue Burns on the policy revisions. We've worked with Barb Slingerland in EC. We know a lot of the people here. We know a lot of the principals and have spent a lot of time doing training, working with folks and encountering a lot of other issues. We've served under 3 superintendents and a lot of different board chairs. I think our governing principle has been the board is our client, but really we are here for the children of Cabarrus County. We're deeply committed to those kids. As people that have kids, I'm a child of 2 teachers. I really believe the children are our future. And what I commit to you to do, if selected as board attorney, is really put the interest of those children first. I believe that's what we tried hard to do for 20 plus years here, is really help make the decisions that are in best interest of the system. How do we help the kids? How do we make decisions that are cost effective, promoting education, helping to be a better and stronger system? And you've got a great school system with great staff. I'm always impressed by the presentations I hear about the great work being done here, and it'd be an honor to come back. Sarah, do you have any comments before we turn to questions? So with that brief introduction, we're here to answer your questions or see what's on your mind. So we're happy to answer any questions board members may have.
Okay, and I will begin with Ms. Adcock.
Well, thank you again. It's great to have you here. Why do you think you are the best law firm for Cabarrus County school systems as it relates to the needs of not only a board of education, but to our CCS leadership team?
Thanks, Ms. Adcock. I think that's a great question because you're right. We really wear 2 hats as board counsel. We sit up here as the board meeting and you see us in the board meetings and some committee meetings, but the majority of the work's actually done with the staff. So we're working with the superintendent, we're working with Crystal, with a lot of the other staff on a variety of issues around student discipline. I think we're the best choice because we have the experience. We know both how to do it and we know about the school system. So we know the people that are here and we've worked with them before and we have that experience, and we have actually been through the process. We've done hundreds of discipline hearings. We've done hundreds of IEP meetings. It's a lot of time that both Sarah and I have spent actually doing that work. And that experience is hard to come by. And it isn't, there are a number of excellent school attorneys that do stuff. I think what makes it a little different is we kind of know how things run here in Cabarrus County schools because of that long experience. So we can bring that knowledge of the system to our jobs, as well as a long background of looking at issues. But I don't want to hog the whole time, Sarah, so you can answer the next one if you want. The other thing I'd say, because I meant to say it at the beginning, we really believe in a team approach. I think that's critical for responsiveness. I think it's the other half of your question. You asked what we bring. Certainly the experience makes us stand apart. but we really are committed to responsiveness. We learned years ago that it was really better to have 2 key contact people than 1, because I may be on sabbatical and Sarah may be on maternity leave. You need, not anymore. But both those happened in the past when we served as board council. But I think having 2 people, and the superintendent will have both our cell phone numbers, may still have our cell phone numbers, and the board chair. We're on call. The work of the school system is not 9 to 5. So having 2 lawyers that are available to answer those pressing questions. Hey, this just happened Friday night after the ball game. What do we do? Hey, we need help with this issue. There's a crisis over here. You've got 2 people that are there and can be responsive, that have had, and the good thing about a lot of experience is we have seen a lot of things come and go. So we've seen weapons brought to schools and problems and things that are very challenging for a school system, but we can help guide that process.
Just one other question. We're seeing now in school systems and school boards are having to look at things totally new that have never entered schools before. Freedom of speech, all kinds of other issues. So how will you rise to the occasion of those challenges when we really have no legal evidence of what that looks like?
I think it's safe to say this the same way we did for over 20 years serving you all. Drafting your social media policy back when social media was MySpace and whatever preceded MySpace. As we have seen the changes, with over 2 decades of experience, we've seen so many new hurdles come forward, and we learned and we adjusted, and we keep abreast of trends nationally and trends that we're seeing, both locally and nationally within the legal community, as well as to a large extent a lot of the problems that you all face are problems that many of our other clients face in the private sector. I always like to, when I was working on a lot of to go back to social media, some of the social media policies from an employment perspective, the challenges you all face as an employer are no different than the challenges some of our private company clients possess. And so we're able to really brainstorm with a lot of our colleagues who do work in that area as well, and bring to bear a lot of experience that comes from being a full-service law firm, having attorneys who specialize in just today in dealing with easements, in dealing with those types of issues, and in dealing with some of your retirement benefit plans, some of those hiccups that we experienced over a few years with that as the state was changing some of their pension rules. And so I think being a school lawyer, you have to stay on the cutting edge of a lot of issues, because typically a lot of things that we see in the high school or in the school setting are things that I've actually shared with some of my colleagues who do more higher ed work. I say, y'all just wait. This is what I'm seeing in middle schools and high school. Those kids are coming to your colleges. These are going to be some of the types of situations you see there as well. And so I think that's really where we've ridden those waves of change, and I think we're well positioned to continue to do so.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Carpenter.
Yes. Okay. First of all, these are some kind of basic questions, and I'm not trying to find out what your age is, but how long have each of you been attorneys? And a question for both of you.
And I'm not. I'm 56 years old, so I don't mind saying that. But I've been an attorney for 30 years. So,
okay. Sarah?
Just over 15 years.
Okay, 15. Okay. How many boards of education, and there I know that y'all represent, and just say in the region, how many board of educations have you worked with?
Start, but you can add. I've done individual projects with I think 5 different boards where I've handled specific cases or they've brought me in, but Cavaris is the only board I've served as general counsel to.
Okay.
So, and I do think that makes us different than some other firms you've talked to that have a number of clients. Our decision was we really wanted to focus. We're right here. I live 20 minutes away. This is home. So this is the board that we really focused on and give that one-on-one attention. So the work I've done for Cabarrus, Gaston County, Union County, a few other things have been individual, either cases or special projects. But I've not served in the role that I served here. I've not done in any other boards.
But
I know
you
Sarah's
said
done a few.
5 other boards.
I think over the course of my career, I think I've worked with 5 other boards of education,
Okay.
either 4 or 5. And we've listed some in it's a long resume, but I've listed some of those specific things. So I know the CMS was some special education work. We did a pregnancy discrimination case for Gaston County years ago that we got involved in. But it's that kind of specific thing, helped with an investigation with another board. But it's been narrower projects as opposed to the general work that we would be doing for you.
I don't know if Sarah had any more.
Yeah, no, my experience is similar to Mark's, probably just a little bit of a shorter list, just from a few less years of practice.
And now this one is more money-wise. I know that, and I know that some of the board, I don't know if we've all seen the actual RFQ, RFP, have seen that. But on the retainer, will y'all be charging mileage? I know y'all are, or how is that?
We would not be charging anything for travel.
No travel, okay.
So, and what we are proposing, for those of you that haven't had a chance to look at it, we do believe that the most efficient system is a flat monthly fee.
Okay.
We've proposed a flat monthly fee of $29,800 a month, which covers not most of the basic services. The proposal actually lists everything that's covered. There are some things that are not, mainly things that vary a lot year to year that we can't include in that pricing. So some of the real estate and construction, litigation, handling big litigation would not be part of that fee. But attending the meetings, doing the policy work, a lot of that umbrella, what I consider the bread and butter work, is all part of that flat monthly fee. And you would pay that every month. I think it's better both for you and for us. There's some months where we're super busy. There are other months, summer's often an example, where things may be a little calmer. It evens it out. I know from conversations with Kelly Klutz over the years, she really likes the idea of a predictable budget amount instead of getting a surprise bill that's $100,000 one month and $20,000 the next. So it is a more consistent model, and that is how we used to provide services when we did it. We had a flat monthly rate, and we're proposing going back to that structure.
Okay. And with that, if I could just add, when there is non-retainer work, being very explicit with you all about, this new litigation is going to fall under non-retainer, and this is what the terms would look like, and so forth, so that there's really trying to avoid any situations of surprise.
And here's my last question, so the other ones can. How much, I know that local-wise you've had quite a bit of experience, but what about your federal and state experience? What kind of exposure can you give us on those type things?
Sure. Well, I would count as I've handled a number of OCR complaints, so that's more of the federal exposure level. We do have, we're a large firm, so in terms of the state and federal, we have an office in Raleigh that handles a lot of that, and I've done a number of things both with the School Board Association but also the legislature. We have an office in Washington, D.C. We have some folks that are really proficient in policy. So our firm, unlike some of the other ones you're looking at, we've got offices in D.C., an office in Raleigh with lawyers on the ground to help at those levels. But that would be, I think it's really and obviously all the IDA, the EC stuff we handle is obviously matters of federal law. We've done work on Title I, which you heard about tonight. So we've got experience in some of the federal education issues, which I think is what you're asking. I don't know if you want to add.
Well, making sure that we are covered, because as we know, education covers all those areas, and we have to make sure we have those bases covered and that we have people that can cover all those bases, because all of them touch those areas, and we want to make sure that we have the expertise in all those areas. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Burke.
All right. First of all, I'd like to thank our two previous board members that's asked you questions. They're on their game tonight, so you guys are in trouble. No. As you know, I don't ask a whole lot of questions. I try to do my work in advance, and we've got a lot of experience with each other, and I appreciate you guys throwing your name back in the hat. But the only question I really had that they haven't already covered, since you were here last, did I understand y'all haven't taken on any new school systems?
We have done some individual work for other systems, but we have not taken on any new general counsel role like this.
Okay.
That's correct.
Yeah, like I said, they pretty much covered everything. So that's pretty much all I've got right now.
Mr. Walter.
Hi. Again, thanks for coming out and your interest in providing services to us again. A little bit different now is we have a different firm that does the real estate stuff. Is your retainer, does that take that into account, or is that assuming that you're going to be taking over both?
So that's a great question. The retainer does not include real estate. We do have a real estate attorney. Hunter Edwards did some work for this system back when we were council, but we also used the Hartzell firm for real estate when we were your board council, and certainly open to continuing to do that. Similarly, there was a time when they did construction work. We've got Ken Michael still with us and did a lot of the construction work on some of those high schools. But I think you do, it's a good point, because you have the option if you could retain us to do the general board work and still use the Hartzell firm for real estate if you wanted, or construction, or other pieces. You don't have to, and you may recall, I mean, we used a number of other lawyers. We brought Chris Campbell from Campbell Shatley in for some work at one point. We had Jill Wilson do some work and handle part of a litigation at some point. I think our role as board counsel is to try to get you the best lawyers, and there's some things that the Hartzell firm did and does excellently. They've done all your forfeiture work, and we would not propose changing that. They've collected millions of dollars over the years in forfeitures. I think have done a great job at that. So we want to do what's most effective, and that includes using local people, and it may include using experienced litigators elsewhere for some kinds of cases. So but it's a long answer to your question. Real estate's not part of that $30,000 monthly fee. You could pay us to do that extra, or you could ask us to use the Hartzell firm to do that real estate piece, and we'd be open to direction from the board on.
Yeah, I'm sorry because I haven't seen your report, but
Sure.
Is there other areas that you would
So,
have someone else handle?
Sure. The big ones are real estate, construction, litigation, and that includes other adversary proceedings. So, various kinds of administrative complaints are also in that litigation category that would not be covered. Special projects, which basically means something that's not, we list a long list of, I think, 8 or 10 different things that are part of the regular work, but if there's something else that would be new and different, that would not be covered as well. So there is that breakdown in there. And again,
yeah, it might be helpful. It's not very dissimilar to how we operated previously. Real estate for a number of years was carved off non-retainer because of how that got built into construction budgets as part of the land acquisition costs. Once matters progress to actual litigation, in many cases you have school board trust coverage. So the trust attorneys would step in, and if it's a matter that wasn't covered by the North Carolina School Board Trust, you would speak with us and we would work with you all to determine who's the best person to defend the litigation. So it really isn't that dissimilar to previously how we had things set up. So I would say anything that's sort of a big standalone type issue has historically been under our proposal, non-retainer, whereas all of the day-to-day, the one-off phone calls, what about this, can you review that, all of that falls under the general services.
As it did before, okay. And these are actually questions from last time, but I'll ask them again. How would you manage a situation in which the board and superintendent are in conflict? How about a divided board?
Sure, I'll be glad to start. We have worked with you all through some situations like that. I think as Mark said, at the end of the day, we are retained by the entity, by the system, by the board as a collective body. And so, I have always found that when dealing in situations of conflict, and we're both actually trained litigators, which maybe makes us a little bit better for this. I don't know, perhaps not, a little too adversarial sometimes, but I think it's helpful because, one of the things we're really trained to do is listen. Right? Listen, talk to folks one-on-one, try to understand where the disputes are, where the fracture is, and what can be done to try to rebuild that trust. If it's an issue between the board and the superintendent, or if it's an issue between board members, really trying to be that neutral voice. We don't have a vote, but we're there in closed session where they're talking with you all about some of the most challenging issues. And so really a way to try to work through that and find the common ground and try to push forward on the issue, but knowing at all times that our allegiance is ultimately to this district as a whole.
Okay. Another one was similar to that was, how would you manage a situation in which the board feels strongly about a position, but you believe that position is not legally supportable?
I can answer that, and I'm grateful there were very few of those in the time where there was something, I don't recall a time where the board went ahead and did something where I said you can't do it and it is illegal. There were a number of times where I felt if I were on the board, I would reach a different decision on something. And my role is to simply help you, facilitate good decision making, follow the law, and follow the policies. And so I can give you that. The decision on what the policy is really entirely up to you. So my role basically ends where I've given you the legal advice. If you choose not to follow it, or I say, yes, there's a risk you can get sued and you want to go ahead and do it anyway, that's up to you, and I'll support you in that and defend you in that decision because you're my client. I'm here really as an advice maker, not to stop you. Now, there's some legal levels, which again didn't happen or unlikely. If you're trying to commit a crime or do something else, I might ethically have to withdraw and say, if you're really taking that path, if you've decided you're not going to provide any services to EC students, then I would withdraw as counsel. I'd say that's a violation of the law. You can't not provide services and withdraw. I've never came close to facing that in the history. And again, one of the reasons I'm excited to serve this board, more so than a generic board, is I have a lot of respect and admiration for the work this board has done over the years. I mean, I've worked with a number of you. You're committed. You don't always agree, but you really are committed to doing what's best for the kids. That's what makes it fun and inspirational to come. I sense that commitment, and I think if you look at, I was delighted to see the 2019 test results be presented. I mean, we've seen a lot of progress in Cavaris, and I think in large part that's strong board leadership. You've had some good superintendents, you got great staff working under them, and so it's unlikely you're going to be in a position where you're doing something I think is outrageous or illegal. But my role ends at giving you my best legal advice, and then you can make that decision.
I appreciate the answer. Thank you. I'm done.
Ms. Blackwell.
All right, so I just want to know, what are some areas that you guys think you could improve on?
One area that I think can be a challenge is the communication piece. And I think responsiveness is critical, but I think sometimes the challenge comes around board communication. The times where we've had a more disjointed board, I felt like that we haven't really done enough around either long-term planning or board training or giving, advice in terms of what's coming up. And that's, if we would retain, I'd like a meeting to just sit down with the board, essentially informal work session, a little like the strategic planning thing that we did years ago, where you go off-site and just say, what are the priorities? What are your legal issues? What do you want from us as attorneys in terms of, do you want us to give a monthly update on current legal issues? Do you want us to give training on legal compliance? Do you want us to talk about policy development? We've done hundreds of trainings on different things over the years, but I think that's an important area. And sometimes when that stops or people aren't talking to each other, you don't get that cohesiveness. It's much harder to do our role and try to facilitate your work. So I would say that's an area that would be one that, to strive for improvement on.
Any others?
I think to piggyback a little bit on what Mark said, I would not, come into this role expecting it to be sort of a step into the time machine and let's just go back to do what we were doing in the, early 2010s through mid 2010s. A lot has happened in the world just in the past year. We have a lot of new faces on this board. There's a lot of different challenges here. So I think really starting with, where do you all feel you need support? What are some of the critical decisions you all are facing? Kind of a bit of a catch us up and debrief so that we can really understand that we're able to step in and provide that type of service that you all are looking for.
Okay, and how do you guys keep current on school law?
So I think it's a combination. We subscribe to a number of different newsletters and email listservs, so we are getting a lot of the alerts, many of them provided by the School Board Association in North Carolina, although there's the National School Board Association too. I am a big believer in conferences, so it's attending annual conferences, and the education section of the bar also offers a conference to really hear what people are looking at and keep abreast of what the latest that's coming. So it's a combination of the email, which is kind of the day-to-day updates, and then the big annual conferences that cover a lot. You want to add to that,
Yeah,
Sarah?
sure. Much like much like I'm sure you all experience, and I know the staff experiences, we're inundated with new services and options of things to read and things to learn from. I happen to enjoy school law and enjoy trying to understand what's going on in the area, and so that's one of the areas that I more naturally gravitate towards. And so it's just kind of constant keeping up with the chatter and sharing experience and insights with colleagues and so forth.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Sandage.
Hey, we meet again. So thank you for coming back. I think it's important that not just 3 board members get to interview our legal counsel or potential legal counsel. So I appreciate you coming in again. And some of the questions that have been asked are what I have. I wanted to know about the $30,000 and how that how we're charged when you have to bring others in, and you explained that. I may have a few questions about that though. The other thing was about other boards of education that you've worked with. So do I understand correctly that Cabarrus County gave you your first chance to work with school board?
That is, well, it's definitely true for me. Jim Cooley, who some of you may remember, was actually the board attorney way back before I got involved, and I was a fairly young lawyer at the time, still an associate at the firm. He knew I was interested in education, and it really was my first exposure was coming with him, sitting next to him in the board meetings, and learning there about what school law was, and starting to do the reading and going to the conferences and figuring stuff out. Over time, I went from kind of sitting next to him to actually covering some of the meetings, and then covering the meetings, and that was a similar process actually for Sarah. So when she was a new associate, I was her mentor supervisor and would bring her to sit with me at board meetings, and now she attends more than half of them on her own. And frankly, we may be at the point you were asking about our long experience. We may be at a point too, we've talked about bringing somebody else along and beginning that training process for a third person. It is a continuum. We'd love to do this long term, and you have to really train and mentor other people to get up to speed. So, but yes, Cavaris was my first entry into school law way back when.
Can you speak a little bit to the learning curve that would potentially come with someone taking on that big of a task from not having any experience before?
Yes, I think it's pretty steep. There, as you know from attending these meetings, there's a lot of regulations, a lot of statutes. I mean, you can't just sit down one night and read 115C and say, oh, I'm a school lawyer now. I think you really have to get an understanding a lot about how school works, how the different administrative teams work together, how the policies interact with the statutes. There is a lot to learn. It took me a number of years, and I was lucky because I had Jim Cooley as a great teacher and had been doing it for years teaching me. So I think obviously people can learn it, but it would be a significant learning curve if you've never served as a board attorney to just come in and try to do it at the beginning, in my experience. I think that's hard to do.
Yeah, if I could just add, I also think there's a fair amount of the role of board attorney that comes with the need to really reflect and use judgment, because a lot of the questions that are posed to us, there's not necessarily always a clear-cut answer on. Like you've said, a lot of the issues are novel. There are some things I can do. I can pull a statute, I can read it to you or tell you what a court case said. But as in so many things, we learn in law school, the joke is, the answer is always it depends, right? There's so many various factors that can go into making a decision and helping you all balance out what the potential risks are, what the benefits are, what the potential, public impact may be, how's it going to impact the reputation of the district, right? All of those different factors, which, again, like Mark, I grew up under his tutelage and with Jim in our office as well, and so I was able to really sort of absorb that and build that almost sort of radar to kind of help you all spot where some of the pitfalls may be and be able to sort of impart a little bit of that experience and judgment.
Well, thanks to Cabarrus County for giving you guys a chance, not having that experience initially. Can you speak a little bit about relationships? Rob asked the question about how do you differentiate between, because for me, and I say this a lot, I think the waters get really muddy when you are representing the superintendent, you're representing the staff, and then you're also the board attorney. So I want to understand how you make sure those waters don't get muddy.
I'm going to let Mark handle this because he's a state bar counsel, and there's actually really good professional ethics rules that we reflect back on and that we've put to use in many cases in terms of saying this is a situation where you all probably do need separate counsel. So.
Thanks, Sarah. And yeah, as Sarah mentioned, I've served for 9 years as a state bar counselor, and I've chaired the ethics committee of the state bar. So we spent a lot of time looking at the ethics rules. It's an important issue to figure out what that relationship is. And there's clear guidance. You cannot represent two people on different sides of a dispute. So if there's a dispute between the superintendent and the board, you can't represent both. Even if you're in the same firm, I can't say, well, I'll take the board, Sarah gets the superintendent, and we'll do it. You really need to bring, where there's that kind of conflict, you need to bring another firm in. And that's what we did historically. I mentioned bringing in Chris Campbell or Jim Wilson or other lawyers. We bring in somebody else and say, we've decided there's a conflict here. And that can happen too on some administrative decisions where the administration's taking maybe a discipline case. We often bring in other counsel because the superintendent's recommending long-term suspension or expulsion. We need to be able to provide independent advice to the board on whether to do that and assess that. So the superintendent would generally get there, if we go into a hearing at least, would get separate counsel on that issue. So I think we're very tuned to that conflict issue. I will say the good news is it doesn't happen a lot that much on the day-to-day stuff. When, if Brian's acting as your superintendent and he's trying to deal with an issue, generally his interests and the board's issues are aligned in following the law, getting it resolved efficiently, protecting staff, doing what's right for students, promoting education. So in the big picture, there's often good alignment there. But you do have to be attuned to that. And we always tell folks in trainings or when we're working, we are the board's attorney. We do have to be very clear, we're not representing any of your staff. I have had principals call me in the middle of the night saying, hey, I've got this issue, I need your help. I've gotten to know a number of your principals, some of them would ask, but I would always need to say, look, we're the school board's counsel. So anything you tell me, I'm going to share with the board and the superintendent. We don't represent you individually. I appreciate if you're alerting me to some school issue, I'm going to put on my school board hat and try to figure out the right course and the right way to handle it. But I'm not representing you because it may be that principal's made a bad decision and is going to end up being disciplined by the same school board. So I need to make it clear at the beginning where my allegiance is, who I'm representing. So that's a great question, something we're very attuned to because it is easy sometimes to lose track of that. Those conflicts situations. Mm-hmm. And our primary obligation is to the board. We are engaged by the board. We counsel with the superintendent, who serves as secretary to the board in the statutory role, but also carries out the board's directives. So again, for most of the work, there's a lot of harmony, and we work to serve both masters. But where there is some conflict or disagreement, it's allegiance to the board, and if the superintendent needs separate counsel, then they need to get separate counsel.
Two more questions. I'm really big on bringing our community together and making sure that what the school board is doing or what the school district is doing aligns with what our community needs. So I've heard a lot about litigations, and that to me having to go to court and spend more money. I'm trying to figure out how your firm would help us make sure we don't get there. Like we're addressing issues before it gets to that point. And when I say addressing, I mean listening to our parents, listening to our teachers, listening to our community, and being a part of those discussions so that we don't have to go to court because we've already addressed it.
Yeah,
and I'm not talking about settlements. I'm talking about really getting down to the root of why are we here and how do we fix it.
Right. I'm happy to start addressing that issue. And I don't have the numbers at my fingertips, but I will say, throughout the course of my 15 years representing you all, I think I went to court maybe a handful of times. Very few cases. We typically, I work a lot, particularly in the with the EC program, whether it's Section 504 or the IDEA program, do a lot of work on policy work, on training work, on working with the director and the program staff when it feels like tension's starting to arise, right? When that classroom teacher or that principal is starting to see potential breakdowns in school parent communications. That's typically when we start seeing it come up, and really trying to brainstorm and thinking about ways to resolve that issue. And so while obviously we are, very capable and able to provide defense in court, we have been involved in actually not many litigations, because we have been able to step in and have been able to work through those resolutions. Likewise, when you start looking at policy committee development, right? Working on the policy committee really does require thinking about how these policies are going to be implemented, and how is it going to be felt by the parents and the students in the schools, and what is that communication process going to look like, and how do we find a way to streamline and put in, place checklists or flow charts or whatever may need to be, so that to the extent there needs to be when doing a suspension, appropriate notice and communications and so forth, that we're putting those things in place to hopefully help facilitate the communications and the process. And so obviously, like some of our colleagues, anyone can always walk into court on any given day and file a lawsuit, but we have found in terms of claims that truly arise from activities within the school, right? Whether it's a personnel claim from a terminated employee, or whether it's a situation in which it's a student discipline or special education student acting upon some of their statutory federal or state rights to bring a claim. We typically are very good, I think, at triaging the issue when it first arises and helping you all make the right decisions and work through the facts and the challenges to minimize legal risk. And quite frankly, that typically results in few case filings. I don't know, Mark, if you have anything else to add.
I think that's a great answer, Sarah. And it's true. I think prevention is key. That's how you avoid spending a lot of money on lawyers. And you've got a grievance policy. You talked about some changes to that process. I think we try to get involved when someone's really angry. That's when you're likely to get into litigation. So giving them an opportunity to be heard, frankly, by fairly impartial, come before us, talk to us as a school board attorney, or we'll sit down with the administrator and bring that impartial outside view to say, what happened here? Why did you make that decision? Are there other options? You can often resolve a lot of those, where you may have an administrator taking one position and the student and the parent are really upset, but there's a middle ground that you can fairly quickly find to say, look, I understand why you did that, but maybe we don't need a long-term suspension here. Maybe there's another resolution. Or just give that angry parent an opportunity to really understand why the rule is why it is, or why that decision was made. They calm down, and 9 times out of 10, those don't end up in litigation. So as Sarah was saying, it's that early triage to say, look, we understand you feel upset. There are policies in place. You can file a grievance. You can bring it before the board. You can talk to us. We'll explain what the rules and policy are. I think, again, most of the time you can try to bridge that in a way that doesn't lead to expensive litigation.
My other question, Sorry, I didn't queue up. My other question was, as I stated earlier, I was one of the 3 board members in the interviews last week, I believe it was, and I noticed you sitting in the back of the room. Can you help me walk me through that decision to do that?
Yeah, that's a great, so it was a public meeting, and I confirmed in advance it was a public meeting. So those interviews, because they are acting as a board committee, are open to members of the public. So I had checked with Kelly Klutz in advance and said it's a public meeting. Assume I can come, but want to make sure there's no COVID problem, and she said it was fine as long as we were separate. I wanted to hear what the other firms you were considering said and get a feel for the questions and concerns of the board so I could do a better job when it was my turn to interview. And obviously, any of the other people could do that as well, because it is open to the public. But that was my thinking in coming and watching, is I could do a better job if I understood what the concerns were and understand what, it is a competition in the sense that you're going to try to pick the best attorney. So I wanted to understand what the other firms are offering and what we're doing. So that's why we were there. I did, Ms. Sanders, what you also, right near the end of our other thing, had asked about diversity, and I do think that's important. And you said, particularly since not all of you have seen the proposal, I do want you to understand it's not just Sarah and I. We have a whole team of attorneys. You see their resumes in our material. But one that many of you that have been here before don't know is Benita Jones. She is a black woman who's done a great job for us, went to Yale undergrad, Georgetown after that, has had many years of school, does nothing but education law. And we would expect her to be involved as well. And the other team members, many of you will remember, but Ken Michael does our construction work. Susan Cooper's done some environmental work here. Richard Rainey's worked with the HR folks and has handled, he's a dedicated full-time labor and employment lawyer. And that is another difference between us and some of the other firms you're looking at, is we've got specialists in a lot of different areas. So if we have a narrow ADA accommodation issue, we'll bring Richard Rainey in because he does that all the time. You don't have to make me, as your school attorney, try to figure it out. If it's a ADA or an FMLA or these other specific issues, we've got a partner, and he's been practicing longer than I have. I don't know the exact number of years, but a very experienced labor and employment lawyer who can come in and help on specific issues. So it's a bigger team. I didn't want to leave the impression it's just, we're going to be your primary contacts, but we've got, you know, a team of 7 total people in that background. I want you to know that too, and particularly including the diversity of the team.
Gotcha. Just to follow up from your answer about being in the back of the room, you said you asked Kelly Klutz.
I did.
Did it go any further, like the board chair or board vice chair?
I don't know if she talked to anybody else. I think because it's a public meeting, any member of the public would be entitled to come and attend those interview sessions.
And I asked just specifically because I'm worried about relationships, and that helps me to understand that. So thank you.
No, and yeah. You're welcome.
Kelly, I'll answer that. So Kelly actually referred to council for that, to get that answer, that it was an open meeting.
Okay. So I guess was that you, Brian? Okay.
And I'm glad to follow up on that if you'd like.
I don't need any follow-up. Again, one of my questions was about relationships, and it's important to know that the board attorney speaks to the board about issues that are directly reflective of the board. That's why I asked that question. Thanks, though.
And we had the other thing, because 4 years ago we had attended each of the other presentations, again, because I'm aware that that's an open meetings law issue. So I may have had some advantage in 2017, having sat through all 4 firms that presented. It was beneficial to me doing that last time, so this time I said I'm going to do that again. I've got a right to be there, and just help me be more prepared.
Thank you. I don't have any more.
Mr. Schultz, do you have any comments or questions?
Yeah, I have I think it's a real quick question. So in 23 days, our current contract runs out. That makes me nervous. So we have a lot of irons in the fire, as you can imagine. Just because the students stop coming to school does not mean the work and the support that we need to carry forth our work ends. So in 23 days, how will you be prepared to take on the duties that are to serve our district in legal capacity?
Thanks. That is a great question, and it is a short transition time. I'm in a little unusual situation in that Brian called me by maybe a month and a half of time, but similar in 2017, Brian, I transitioned everything that we were doing after a series of phone calls and emails and a pretty major transfer of files, which I guess we'll have to ship back. It's a lot of work and a lot of transition. But we are ready to go. I'm ready to start tomorrow. If you would like, if you make your decision tonight, I think we'd be ready to start tomorrow, meeting with Brian, meeting with you, talking about what the current items are. And probably I do recommend at least, I usually say at least a month. I guess we don't have 23 days, some period of overlap. I realize you've got one contract ending, but really it is important to have some time for us to get up to speed. You can't snap your fingers and be up to speed on everything July 1. It's just not realistic. As you said, there's a lot going on. And we don't know what's going on the legal front because it's all privileged. So I don't know how big the file cabinet will be when Brian hands it off. But I would envision meeting with him this week and you this week and probably the board chair this week to say, okay, what's in progress? Do our own triage again? What are the things we need to be ready for immediately for July and do a smooth transition? And again, Brian and I think worked well on the transition last time. We wanted to make sure nothing was dropped in that transition and the handoff. And I think it was handled professionally, and I know it'll be handled professionally again. But there is a lot of work. So I'm glad. It ideally would have been great to decide a month ago, but I think if you decide now, we'll take that time. But I would suggest you engage whoever you decide to go with tonight, engage them immediately for that transition, because you really don't want to wait and have me start working July 1. That would create real potential disruption, because you're going to call me on the afternoon of July 1 saying, hey, this has been going, I need an answer to this, and without any background, it's going to be hard to give you the kind of advice that I pride myself on, because I won't have the history. So it'd be good to spend some time. But I think we're interested and committed to doing it and ready to start tomorrow if that's the direction the board wants to go, to make that transition as smooth as possible. I guess the other thing I'd say is it does help that we know a lot of the other staff. So some of the personal relationships are there, and I think will be easy to restart. So it's not starting brand new where we have to learn everybody in the system. We do have some of that background, but there's still going to be a lot of work to do. That's another, and again, it'll all be covered under the flat fee, so we're not asking for any transition fee or extra work. I propose we just make June the first month of the budget, and we'll just cover all that. It will be a lot. I know already that first month will be a lot of work getting up to speed, but that would just be part of that fee. It's a good question, though. I understand the anxiety about handing everything over. It is a stressful process.
Okay. Anything else? Any other questions or comments for Womble? No? Okay. All right. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you
all.
all.
We appreciate you being here tonight. And now we will ask Hartzell Williams Vogel and that group to come to the podium. Good evening.
Schultz, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to come tonight and speak to y'all to answer any questions y'all may have. We're very excited with the opportunity to serve y'all going forward. Hartzell Williams has been in Cabarrus County since 1896, and we're not going to leave anytime soon. We have several associates that are coming up that are excited about doing work both in the community and being very invested in the community. Community is very important to Hartzell Williams. I've served on a number of boards currently, Boys and Girls Club. I'm on the Fair Board with Ms. Carpenter. It runs the gamut of Rotary, past president. It's very important to be able to do those things for our community and be out there and be a voice and also be an ear to what's going on and what we can do. And we're excited to be able to be here. Mr. Vogel.
Yep, thank you. On behalf of Vogel Law Firm, real excited to be here and to have this opportunity to present to you. For some of you who are presenting for a second time around, and appreciate that opportunity. I've been practicing education law for the better part of 20 years. I've been a lawyer for 25 years. I have been the second highest ranking lawyer at the United States Department of Education in Washington, D.C. I founded Vogel Law Firm to solely focus on education law. That's what we do. Education law. Our focus is on compliance and fairness. We had an opportunity to meet a few of us a week ago, and I had a chance to talk about my passion for education law, my passion for ensuring that my clients comply with the law, and my passion for being fair and doing the right thing by the students of Cabarrus County Schools. The board members who were in attendance there showed me a lot of head nodding, and I think they understood and they got it, and they got to know who I was and what I've done. I think some of the other people in the room weren't used to hearing what they heard, because I'm not the type of education lawyer who they've seen before. I'm not a part of the let's call it the K through 12 education establishment, right? I'm a different kind of lawyer. And rather than talk about what I'm not, let me tell you what I am and what I have done. In representing families throughout North Carolina, I'm the kind of lawyer who gets contacted when there's a problem, right? I'm the kind of lawyer who, like a criminal prosecutor or criminal defense attorney, gets called in when something's gone wrong. And so I get a lot of phone calls from families who are approaching an IEP meeting. One is coming up, and they don't know what it is, and they don't know what to do, and they don't know what to say, and they don't know who to bring, and they don't know what documents to review. And so I'm providing them a lot of advice behind the scenes. Sometimes the calls come into me after they have gone to an IEP meeting and they call me for the first time. And too often I get those phone calls from mothers who are crying, literally crying, because of what they were put through in an IEP meeting. Not that they didn't get all the services that they wanted and they're, bad sports or something about it, but the way they were treated. And this includes Cabarrus County families. So that's some of the work that I do. And then sometimes they have to call upon a lawyer when things get a little confrontational and they want to file due process hearings and go through to an administrative law judge. Sometimes it's a state DPI complaint process that I've handled. Sometimes it's a complaint to the Office of Civil Rights, OCR, at the U.S. Department of Education that I've handled. So these are the ways that I have been involved in the past, much like a prosecutor is on the ground doing battle. But just like a prosecutor who leaves the prosecutor's office and goes into private practice to help clients comply and avoid the battles down the line, so too, I am here before you with an opportunity to leave behind the battles on behalf of the families and instead to work for you and to ensure compliance so that all Cabarrus County students and families have the rights that they deserve, and that you, the board, avoid litigation and avoid risk and avoid reputational harm. And that's what I'm here to do. It's a great opportunity to be before you again.
Okay, board members, I will open it up for comments and questions, and I'll start with Ms. Sadich this time.
All right, so I'll ask the same questions, and I may have some additional questions. I'll try not to keep us too long, though. Have you worked for other boards of education?
Hartzell & Williams is currently the real estate and construction law firm for this board. So yes, ma'am, for the past 4 years, we've done that. In the years past, prior to Womble, Hartzell & Williams was the board attorney for Cabarrus County School Systems. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Can you help me understand how you would work, or I guess work with the board and the superintendent and the staff and the parents? How do you bring that all into perspective and to make sure, again, that those waters aren't muddy?
I will answer that briefly, but also turn to Mr. Vogel because he has some great insight on that. I do that every day. Because of some of my clients, I have parents that hire me, I have children that come to me for help, and I have family members that are all involved. So we have a lot of hands in the pie. But at the very outset, there's direction that my client, who is my client? In this instance, it would be the school board. Y'all are my client. And to the extent there's conflict, what we have to do, or there extent that there is muddying of water, what we have to do is we have to give advice to the board as to what your position is, what your options are, and how we see it going, and what's the best way to come together with an answer. Because litigation is not always the answer. The only people that enjoy litigation are the attorneys, because that's where we live and breathe. But what happens is to have the vision to know if we go to court, or if this is an answer, why are we going to go to court? There's different solutions to it, because that's what we have to have is solutions to problems, and it starts with listening. It starts with understanding. But at the end of the day, my client is who I serve, and that would be the board.
Yeah. Let me add that in the course of my practice, I have found conflicts of interest all over the place in school education, being committed by school districts. I'm constantly seeing some of the establishment education law firms representing competing interests. And even after speaking with the lawyer about it and alerting them to the concern and the violation of legal ethics rules, they tell me it's fine, everything's fine, we do this all the time. I hear that one a lot. We do this all the time. Well, a lot of those lawyers now have North Carolina bar complaints pending against them. What we bring to you in our presentation are two law firms. So built in, you have a separation. What I mean by that is in a, let's say, an employee discipline matter, all right? The Vogel firm can work with the superintendent, can work with human resources and provide advice as to the decision-making and legal compliance and what to do, whereas Hartzell & Williams will stay separate. They will not be involved in that. They're a different law firm, and they won't be involved with that representation of the superintendent and the staff. Hartzell & Williams will represent the board, because that kind of matter may very likely get to the board in the form of a hearing. That's one example. So you won't have to hire another law firm. You won't have to hire another lawyer who's brought in on a special project at his or her hourly rate. You have two law firms already.
Is that included in Is that included in the price that we're?
It's all inclusive.
Okay. So I heard this in the interview, but I want the other board members to have a chance to hear how you talked about working with parents and making sure that we address those problems or those issues or those conflicts before they get to them being, so volatile. Can you just tell the other board members what you said?
Yeah, I sure will. So you heard me speak a few minutes ago about the reactions of families to IEPT meetings. And it's tragic. It's very, very sad. And it can be avoided, right? So the question was, how can we, mitigate and minimize risk? And what we should do, if selected, what we would advise is training and thinking about how to approach the IEPT meeting and the Section 504 meeting. How can it be more collaborative and less confrontational? Now, you might have, wonderful staff who tell you it's not confrontational, it's always collaborative. But I'm just telling you what I'm hearing from families who have walked out of your meetings and what they tell me. Now, this is not to say that every parent is going to be satisfied after every meeting. Of course not. But there has to be a way, there is a way, to be able to talk about this and to prepare and to approach these meetings differently so that so we ensure that we're treating the families with respect and they feel like they've been heard even if the meeting didn't go 100% their way. By doing that, you minimize the chances that they will take it further because they feel like they've been wronged legally or otherwise.
Last question. So I heard Mr. White talk about how he is involved in community here in Cabarrus County. Can you help me understand how you are involved or how you're involved in this community?
Mm-hmm. Well, to begin with, I'm going to be a big part of Cabarrus County if I am selected along with Hartzell and Williams to be counsel because Hartzell and Williams is making their office available to the Vogel firm, and so I've got an office in Concord that I'll be working out of. But besides that, I stay active. I am a board member of an organization called Lifespan that is based in Charlotte. And what Lifespan does is it provides services to children all the way up through adults and seniors who are disabled. We're talking about preschool types of services. We're talking about after-school services and services to help disabled adults obtain employment. And I'm real excited about that. In the past, I have served on a board regarding scholarships for low-income students to attend independent schools. And so I'm the kind of person who is involved in the community with a focus on education.
Ms. Blackwell?
Wow. Okay. So I'm just going to be fair and ask you the exact same thing.
Sure.
What do you guys think your weaknesses are?
I'm going to turn your mic off. A couple of things. I think it's very important I am always working. I've been married for 30 years. Actually, August 31st will be 30 years. And learning the difference between my listening ears and my solving ears is many times because as a litigator, I'm trying to solve a problem. So that many times when I am listening to somebody, I'm also processing, okay, how do I solve this? How do I solve this? And that may not be the right way to do it. So that one of the issues that I'm trying to work on, that I've been working on for a number of years, and I've gotten better, is putting on my listening ears and put down my solving ears. That's number one. Number two is going down the rabbit hole. I'm fascinated with the whys. I feel as if I can teach and if I can educate someone the why we're doing it, why we're making this decision, then that helps. And in order for me to explain the why, I got to go down the rabbit hole. I also call it the ham story. And the ham story is the man that goes to his wife and says, can I help you cook ham at Thanksgiving? She goes, yeah, sure, come on in. And she goes, whack, cuts half of it off, throws it away, and puts the other half in and cooks it. And he goes, why do you do that, honey? That's how you cook ham. So he says, that's how my mom taught me. He goes to the mother-in-law, Can you tell me how you cook ham? Yeah. You cut half of it off, throw it away, put it in the pot and cook it. She said, where did you learn it? He said, my mother. So he goes to the grandmother. And she says, tell me how you cook the ham. She says, well, I put it in the pot and I cook it. He says, well, what about cutting it in half? He says, honey, my pot was too small. So one of the problems that I try and do is get down to the why. If I kind of understand the why, and sometimes that helps my client in the flat fee, doesn't help me, but I serve my client, and that's what comes first to me.
Yeah, I have an answer that's similar, and maybe it's not surprising. As lawyers, we talk a lot. I don't know. We're trained to my arguments for and against, and so we have the gift of gab. But I carry with me my own anecdote from my time at the United States Department of Education. Right prior to joining the Education Department in Washington, I was at the Justice Department in Washington, where I was one of the top legal advisors to the head of the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department. So at the Justice Department, the lawyers are typically also the client. What we thought needed to be done on disability rights or housing accommodations or educational opportunities in some of the desegregation cases that were pending, we did. Okay, but I went to the Education Department after the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department, and I was advising one of the top people in the department, the Assistant Secretary of Higher Education, on a particular matter, and I told her what to do, and she came to my office, and she said, Jonathan, I'm the Senate confirmed Assistant Secretary. You don't tell me what to do. You give me advice. You assess the strengths and the weaknesses of a particular idea, or policy position, and I make the decision. And I said, Madam Assistant Secretary, yes. Okay. And that was a great lesson for me to learn, that advising clients, you have to give them your best advice. You have to do the hard work and analyze the position with all the smarts that you have and all the research and all the experience that you have. But ultimately, it's on you, the client, to make some of these tough decisions. And we will tell you where we are on it. The kind of decision we might make and why. But it's your decision, and you're elected by the voters to make those decisions, and we'll support you.
All right, so my last question was, how do you keep current on school law?
Mm-hmm. I keep current on school law by my membership in an organization that I'm in right now, which if I'm retained by this Board of Education, I will no longer be a member of the Council of Parents and Advocates and Attorneys. See, lawyers generally receive their information about legal developments in this way. No one should be under the misimpression that lawyers are sitting in their offices or cubicles and following House bills and Senate bills all day. Rather, we join associations and organizations at the local, national, or state level. And we get emails, daily emails and weekly emails, and we stay abreast on current events. I do it that way, and also, frankly, following social media and getting some of the latest developments in all areas.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Let me answer as well.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
No, that's fine.
No.
There's also continuing legal education. It's called CLE, so that we have a strict number of times or hours that we're supposed to take every year. And I can't tell you the last time I took the minimum. I've been, so that continuing legal education, attending conferences, and also being presenters. I'm typically a presenter at least 2 or 3 times a year, either in child support or criminal law or whatever the topic is that they are needing a presenter on. So those are other areas. Thank you.
Mr. Walter?
Thanks for coming tonight and presenting again, because I did not get the first presentation, so I'm kind of a little bit at a loss. It's the first time I'm hearing from y'all. Kind of what you had talked about before, but if you're at an IEP meeting and the parent is adamant that they want a service, and that's not a service the school system can provide, how do you handle that situation?
Well, I might not be, me personally, might not be at the IEPT meeting. I might be, though, especially if the parent brings his or her own attorney. There's no magic rule about how to, how to address that scenario. It's a matter of how you say it, not just what you say. So yes, what you say has to be grounded in reason. It has to be grounded in law that needs to be explained in a non-condescending way, and it must be, the meeting as a whole must be collaborative. Because the parent is a part of the IEP team, and the IEP team members from the school and the school district need to understand that, and need to understand that the family has rights. And if they're not being treated fairly, then they might go, other routes to, a state DPI complaint, or a due process hearing, or an OCR complaint, which is very easy to make online. And so even putting aside those risks, those legal risks, do the right thing, right? Make sure that it's well grounded in reason and law, and communicate it properly. I've said this now a couple of times, but it's worth repeating. How it is said, how you handle the parents, how you speak with them, how you treat them, makes a difference. And, there might be room for improvement there.
Thank you. Can you go over the list of legal services that you provide to school districts? Please explain what you provide to the administration, and then what services you provide to the board, and what you don't do.
We have outlined that in the proposal, Mr. Walt. I know that.
Didn't see the proposal. So.
I got it. If you would like, I got a copy of it if you'd like what we have proposed. But we do have a flat fee very similar to what you've heard from earlier tonight that covers the majority of the topics. That it would be advice to the board, education, it would be training, things of that nature. The hourly rate would be changed when it is litigation, special ed, or some of the other areas that we have as well. So it's broken out very similar to what you've already been presented. Ours is a retainer rate of $30,000 a month, and the legal fees are $250 an hour, and an associate, it would be $150 an hour, which is substantially less than the other offer that you've been provided, between $300 and $700 an hour.
Thank you for that. Another role that you have as a board attorney is to sit up here for our meetings and help us with our being a parliamentarian, if that's the word I'm trying to say. What is your experience doing that, and which one of you is going to be up here?
I would be up here, and I have extensive parliamentary procedure, Robert Rules of Orders. I've been blessed with the vast majority of the boards that I've began to serve on. I've risen to the level of chairing or being president or chairman, depending on what their nomenclature is. So I've run it through that matter. Whether it's the tourism board, I have not been the chair or president there, but the tourism board, and also the board of commissioners. There's a number of boards that I've been on, and so I'm well versed in Robert's Rules of Order.
And I guess what I've asked the other firm is, how would you manage a situation in which the board feels strongly about a position, but you believe that it's not a legally supportable position?
That's unfortunately that happens many times, because my client or our clients sometimes they're so emotionally involved in a case that you have to explain and educate the purpose of what the decision is and why you're trying to help legally and what the legal decision is. And when it comes to a level that starts conflict, I've never had that issue, because typically when you educate, anything I'm going to talk about, I'll provide. If it's a case, I'll provide the case. If it is a statute, I'll provide the statute. If it's a code, I'll provide that. Because what happens is this: then through the educational process and the teaching process and learning and listening, then we can get discussions about exactly where we're going to go. But just because I advise you of one area or one way to go, and you choose not to take my advice, as long as it doesn't affect ethics, and as long as then we're okay. But I'm going to advise you as the legal position why you should do it, and if you take this decision, this is what I think it's going to do down the road. It's also foreshadowing or foreseeing what your decision may be.
Thanks, Jay. Related, how would you manage the situation with the board and the superintendent are in conflict? How about a divided board?
Well, I've seen that happen, and unfortunately, we sometimes go through that. And at the end of the day, my client's the board. And I would advise, I would counsel as to what your decisions are, what is your concerns, and how to address those concerns. But at the end of the day, my client is y'all.
That's all I got, right?
Mr. Furr?
Yeah, once again, y'all handled some pretty tough questions, and I'm not going to repeat the same questions, but Mr. Vogel, you looks like you've got a quite experience and basically going to battle against systems and boards. So how do you think that transfers on the other end?
It transfers very well, much like when I was a federal prosecutor with the United States Department of Justice here in Charlotte, trying cases, bank fraud and money laundering against wrongdoers at financial institutions and otherwise. I then went into private practice representing banks and representing companies who appreciated the knowledge I had and the credibility I had as a former federal prosecutor, right? So I had prosecuted people for fraud and money laundering crimes, and now big banks were paying me to provide them advice on anti-money laundering and anti-fraud because of the perspective, right? When you've been in the trenches, you've seen what could happen, right? You've been in battle. You know what can happen, and that puts you in a wonderful position, a unique position to advise your client on how to avoid that. And what does it take? It takes some listening and working with the people and hearing what they do and what their concerns are. And the advice that I give, because of where I've been, is credible and strong.
Yeah. One more question. So if you guys who are selected, based on what I'm hearing you saying, you would really be proactive in training some of our departments probably that would avoid some of these situations.
Absolutely.
And so, and Rob asked a good question about, you guys sitting up here with us, which one, and I was wondering how much involvement Mr. White would be with us, and
I would be very involved with y'all. And what would happen is education is huge, because when you educate, when you help, when you start listening to the client or to the people that the client wants us to work with, that's when we start really figuring out, okay, what is the training? How does that training work? What works for you? So I think it's more of a top tier down. Is yes, I do want to hear from the teachers. I do want to hear from the principals. I do want to get engagement there. But I need to know from y'all, what is it y'all are thinking about? Where do y'all see some deficiencies? Mr. Schultz, I need to hear what he has to say. Dr. Hill, I need to hear what she has to say, because they have the insight of what they see on a different level. But what's also important is the teacher, because we need to hear what the teacher's saying is, these are the issues I'm having. When I'm in the trenches, when the bullets are flying, what am I going to do? And what we want to do is be able to not have to think about it, but to know it and to be able to respond there.
Ms. Carpenter?
Okay. First of all, Mr. Vogel, so you have never worked for a Board of Education. Is that a correct assumption?
That's correct.
Okay. Second of all, why have you never chosen to subscribe to if you're concerned about Board of Education, why have you never concerned about maybe subscribing to the Board of Education subscription? I mean, to get information. To me, that would be number one if you're concerned about Board of Education. I mean, to get information, you would learn many things about general statutes, about what's happening in boards of education. To me, that would be number one place to get information. Why have you never subscribed to that?
They won't let me in.
Wonder why.
It's an exclusive club of lawyers who represent school boards. And I don't yet represent a school board, but just like our competing law firm that was up here, there's always a first. And we are hopeful that you are the first, and I can join that club, and I can get those emails and listservs and things like that. But I have my own clubs, and I learn a whole lot of developments and substance of education law. Recall last week we talked about the Mahoney case pending at the U.S. Supreme Court. We should get a decision perhaps by the end of the month. So I don't want you to be under the misimpression that I'm not knowledgeable about developments in education law. I am, and I try, and I want to get into that club.
Anyway, and isn't it true, Mr. White, you mentioned about how your firm had once represented the school board, but isn't it true that who was on the board at that time, they're no longer with your firm?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
Okay, but you led this board to believe that you had, those people are no longer with your firm.
Hartzell and Williams did represent, and then Fletcher was the primary attorney. Michael Bergner also assisted as well. I'm not certain whether Mr. Bergner came to any of the meetings or not. I believe he did on a time or two, but I'm not certain about that exactly.
But your education person that was with them at that time, they're no longer with the firm at this time. Is that not correct?
Correct. Mr. Hartzell is not.
Okay,
Mr.
but
Bergner
I don't
is.
want you to lead this board to believe that you've got that educational experience that you used to have. Is that a correct assumption?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm just making sure we've got that clarified.
But he's got an improvement. He's got me now.
That's right.
Well, now wait a minute. You do not have the Board of Education. You're not on that list yet. I want to make sure we've got that clarified. And then the other thing, and we've mentioned this before, and I don't want to, I really have some concerns. I know that you actually resigned when you took the position, Mr. White. I'm Mr.
That's
White.
fine.
I don't want to call you by first name.
I did resign from the Board of Commissioners.
Because
to work
of
for
taking over the
Yes,
social
ma'am.
services.
Because that would be a conflict.
Conflict, and this is where I've got some
Sure.
concern, because I know you do represent the social services and the children that are there, and you do an excellent job.
I do not represent the children. I represent the department. The
The
Guardian ad
department.
litem's office represents the
And
children.
I know, but a lot of the children, and what I'm concerned with is if we did have a case, because we do handle a lot of children, and I mean that's what education is about, and handling those children, and that's what concerns me if we would have a situation where we would possibly have a student hearing or have one of our departments that's representing one of those children, and those parents come to you crying. I'm using his phrase. Those parents are crying and they want you to represent their child.
Okay.
What's
I don't
going to
represent
happen in that case? Because you have seen their child and you've seen those parents beforehand. What is going to happen in that case?
Number one is I don't represent the children. That's the Guardian ad litem's office. Number two is I don't represent the parents because I represent the department in trying to reunify the children with the parents. So it would not be a conflict of interest if a child were to come before this board for whatever the issue may be, because they're not my client. The client, or excuse me, the attorney for that is the Guardian ad litem attorney's office. So that would not be me. That would not be Hartzell and Williams. There would not be a conflict.
Well, I mean, it could be any department. I mean, social services covers a large, a whole bunch of different departments.
It does, but there is not a point in time that we represent the child. So there would not be the conflict. That would not be a client. The client would not be the child, which would create the conflict in your scenario. And we don't represent the parent. They have parent attorneys. I do not represent the parents.
Okay, I just want to make sure we wouldn't have it. I know
You would not.
about a year or so ago we did have an instance where we did have a case.
And that was not a conflict. That was 3 years ago. And what had happened is the department was uncertain as to what was going on. They tried to get information, and they were not given any information. And they asked me, "Can you please tell me what's going on?" And I said, "Certainly. I will come out, listen to what's going on, and just tell you what's going on."
Okay, well, I just want to make sure we don't run into that.
Well, what happens is I was not here for the the child. I even told your council at the time, and that the council said, I agree, you're not here for the child.
Okay, well,
So-
that's one of my concerns. I want to make
Yes,
sure we
ma'am.
don't have that. And you've already specified, and again, I think that we need to make sure that we do have, a lot of the board members have not seen the RFQ for both of them to find out what the particulars are on this. And
If I may approach
we
Ms.
do
Carpenter.
need to see that. Do you, we have not seen.
I think that covers the balance.
Okay, on that, we've not seen those to see what they are, and since you give that to us, we've got that. And you have stated, you told me, what is, same question I asked the other ones. How long y'all been attorneys? Y'all basically said that, so if you'll tell me how long you've been attorneys.
I've been an attorney for 25 years since I graduated the Emory University School of Law.
Okay, and Jay?
30 years, 1991.
And how long?
30 years.
30 years,
Yes,
okay.
ma'am.
Okay, y'all both asked that, and I think I've got, and you said, in mileage, you've got it in here, but mileage, because I asked the other one, are y'all charging, or is it all in your?
I believe we have it all in there.
Okay, you have it all in there.
But-
Okay, so
answer.
that's all my questions. Thank you very much.
Tell her the answer.
Mrs. Carpenter, mileage, since I'm local, since we are local, it'd be driving down the road to see y'all. So
Okay, all
now,
right.
if we're having to go, if y'all are asking us to go to Raleigh every day, maybe a different story.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Ms. Adcock?
Okay, glad to see you guys again. So why do you think you're the best law firm for the Cabarrus County school system as it relates to the needs of the board and the CCS leadership team?
I think this board deserves somebody that thinks outside the box and doesn't do a cookie cutter approach. I think this board needs to have the opportunity to listen to what your concerns are, listen to what y'all are wanting to do, and educate as to how that looks. And I think that's what I know that's what you have with Vogel and Hartzell and Williams. We have the opportunity to not only help in a unique perspective that way, but also be attentive and be responsive, where I am literally 10 minutes down the road, downtown Concord. If somebody were to need me, we'd be here, I would be here. Mr. Vogel, he's going to have an office in our building, so he would be available as well, and so that we have that. In regards to services, and you would have a prompt response, whatever it may be. If there's a phone call, each one of you would have my cell phone, and have Mr. Vogel's cell phone, and be able to contact us. The staff would be as well if they need it, so that you have that. But I think the very most important thing is responsiveness, listening to what the board's desires are, education as to what that looks like, but also being able to provide the results that y'all are looking for and to think outside the box. Today's age is not a matter of cookie cutting. And I think another thing that's very important, that's kind of maybe not known, is education is near and dear to my heart. Because if our children are educated, that means we get better jobs here, we get better employment here, and my kids come back here, and right now, my grandkids, when they start coming, will come back, hopefully. Darcy is a Title I tutor, loves it. She missed being in the classroom or helping these children at the Title I school she was. My daughter is a teacher. And the one thing that sends chills up my spine when I think about it today is she was up for the Moorhead Scholarship, got to the semifinals, and was asked a question, why would we give this to a teacher? She could have wilted and not responded. But she had the foresight and the confidence in herself to say, if I can teach the next kid that loves math to be the Einstein, or the next doodler to be Picasso, then I've made more of an impression on that child's life in the world than any lawyer, any doctor. And that's what's very impassionate to me, is that's what you're going to get with Vogel and Hartzell and Williams.
Did you want to answer that as well?
I wouldn't dare add to that. Thank you.
Okay. I want to just piggyback off of something that Ms. Carpenter was talking about. So I've heard that Mr. Vogel has experience in special education, EC students, and talking about their parents, but that is a very small portion of our kids. I mean, we serve 34,000 children, and if you add all the parents, you're talking about over 100,000 people in our community. So how are you going to really respond to the needs of our CCS leadership team. The board has very minimal interactions with our legal team, but the daily needs of our CCS leadership team is what is going to be the biggest part of what you're going to do. So how are you going to look at those needs and how are you going to meet them? Because they are going to be a broad range of topics, transportation, technology. I mean, there's going to be a lot of different areas that you're going to have to cover just besides EC.
Well, that in regards to the needs, in regards to the prioritization, in regards to how do we hit boots on the ground running, that's what it's going to boil down to Mr. Schultz. And I am willing to, and I'm willing to roll up my sleeves and work with him. And he may have to kick me out of this building because I'm tired of seeing your face. But that's what happens is we need to know what's going on and we need to know what his concerns are. We need to know what the young people behind us, their concerns are, and understand what their needs are and address those needs either by Mr. Vogel or by myself or by our law firms. Is that we've got to figure out where is the best place to get that source of information and provide the best service possible for y'all.
Do you have anything to add? Okay, that's all.
So I just want one clarification. Ms. Carpenter, you were on the interview committee, correct?
Yes.
So you should have seen all this information, correct?
No, we didn't have, Kelly had those that. She did not give it to us. All we got, you know that, all we got was that thing we just filled out with the questions on it. We didn't have that. Kelly got those back.
Where's the other one?
We don't have, I don't have it. Kelly had those.
Okay. So you did not review
No,
those?
we didn't have those. I can tell you how we ranked it, and I'll be more than happy to share how the ranking was.
So you had to know that it was in the email?
Huh?
This was on the email to us.
Yeah, it was emailed to us.
Did
the
you see it,
information.
Ms. Adcock?
I did.
Okay.
Do you have, I don't have that
This is
other one.
different from what was emailed to us. Yeah, no, we got 3 different ones that were emailed to us with the times for the interviews.
I just want to make sure everybody received the same amount of information when you were a part of the interview committee. Okay. So, any other comments or questions from board members?
Can we get the other one from the other phone?
They have that, and I'll make sure that it gets to y'all as well. Well, I thought it did too, but I'm not sure. So I will. Right, I did too.
I can forward it to you.
That would be great. If you can do that, that would be great.
Is that on this
So,
interview
Mr.
thing?
Schultz, Ms. Carpenter, will you unkey your mic, please? Thank you. So, Mr. Schultz, you had an opportunity with Womble. Would you like to address?
Sure. Just 2 things. One is the question about the transitioning. So 27 days or 23 days from now, sorry, didn't mean to add to that. 23 days from now, we'll be transitioning legal team. So I just want to hear about your thoughts on that, and then I have one other follow-up question.
I think it's very important to meet with you and meet with Madam Chair and whomever else y'all decide is the best way to address whatever concerns y'all have. I think it's to prioritize what the needs are going into the balance of the summer, but also into the fall. I think it's also important to get in a timeline, to get an appropriate timetable as to when are we going to have training? How are we going to get that done? What's the most efficient way to get that accomplished? Because right now, with a few days after school is over with, but you still got graduation this weekend, right? You've got to figure out is, with everybody's going to the 4 winds, how do we make certain that everybody's getting educated? And I think that's through emails, through Zoom, through Teams meetings, through different media to be able to get education out, to get these topics done, and also to be with Mr. Shaw and get the transfer of the files if we're chosen. So there's a lot of things that need to get done. It's creating a timetable and figuring out what it is to address y'all's needs, but also to be able to make certain the legal team is up and running come 22 days and 3 hours.
Thank you. And so the other question, I was able to kind of ascertain the team from what Mr. Enriquez described from his team. So just in terms of who would understand, you would be here at the board meetings, understand you would be handling special education, some other things related. to the educational piece. So what about other members of your team that be assisting all the different legal aspects that we deal with on a daily basis?
What would happen is you got David Williams doing the real estate, you got Andrew Cornelius doing the construction law, so you have those topics covered. And then what we would do is we would have a drop-down approach in regards to what other people in our firm and the Vogel law firm that would be able to better serve whatever the issue may be. So it would be an idea would be to communicate with Jonathan or myself. We would then identify what the topic is, what the issues are, and then figure out who is the best person to be able to address that need head on, either by commitment in regards to other commits that may be happen, or the timetable. Because if you need the answer yesterday, we may have a different person with input from one of us. But it would be something that we'd walk through and talk through. And I would imagine over a short period of time, everybody would get to know the people in our firm, to be able to understand we'll start figuring out the smoothest way to deal with that.
And Mr. Vogel, do you have additional team members?
I use associate attorneys on an as-needed basis in the past. If we are selected, there will be a need, and I will be ramping up and hiring at least 1 to 2 associates, and also have the benefit of Hartzell and Williams attorneys.
Thank you both. I appreciate it.
Okay, any other comments or questions from board members? Hearing none, thank you. Ms. Carpenter,
Okay.
go ahead.
Well, do you want?
Can you key up?
Do you want to say what the committee had, or do you want to wait on that?
Well, if we're done, I'll let them take their seat. We can continue discussion. Okay, thank you, guys. Okay, so board members, we need to have some discussion just to start the decision-making process. So I'd like to hear from each of you if you're ready to make a decision, if there's additional information that you need or require to make that decision, or just where you are at this point in time, because time is of the essence, of course, with this decision. So I will begin with Ms. Adcock.
I did send that email to all of you, so you should have that. It has a document on there. I don't need any other information, and I'm ready to make a decision.
Ms. Carpenter?
At this point, like I say, the only thing I didn't know if y'all wanted how the committee had, what their choices had been. I'll be more than happy to share that with what we had come up with. I'll be more than happy to share that with y'all. At this point, you know, I'm good. So whatever if y'all want that information, I'll be more than happy to share it. I'll leave it up to the board if they want that information. I'll give it. And that's.
So is there anything you need additional to make a decision?
No, she said she sent that other here, so that's fine.
Okay. Were you able to review that information when you were part of the interview team?
I did not see that. Kelly had it.
Okay,
but
so do you need to review it as well, or?
I was.
And that's okay. I'll continue down the line. I just want to make
yeah,
sure.
go ahead.
Okay. Mr. Furr?
I'm ready. What for? No, ma'am, I don't need any more information.
Okay. Mr. Walter?
All right, well, this is the first time I've been exposed to either of these presentations. I still don't have the one for Womble, I'm sorry. I mean, I'm intrigued with Mr. Vogel and his perspective. I've always been a parent advocate and I like a different perspective, but again, I haven't seen the other one to read through it, so I'm not prepared to make a decision.
Okay. Ms. Blackwell?
I'm prepared to make a decision.
Do you want to take a break?
Yes, can we do that?
Okay. Ms. Sandage, our Vice Chair would like to ask that would you like to entertain a break for just a short period of time?
So you can
Do it just a short recess? Is that good for everyone? Okay. Well, at this time, I'll entertain a motion to take a brief recess.
So moved.
I have a
Second.
motion by Mr. Furr and a second by Ms. Sandage. We will take is 15 minutes good for all? Okay, we'll take a 15-minute recess at this time, and then we will re-adjourn. Okay, board members, we are back in session. I'm going to open up the floor for discussion again, and with this, I'm going to start back on Ms. Sandage's side, and I'll take comments or questions, and then we need to make a decision tonight, if at all possible, that this is an action agenda item.
I'm ready to go. I was ready to go last week. I'd like to make a motion for us to approve Hartzell, Williams, and Vogel for our legal counsel.
And I'll second that.
So I have a motion by Ms. Sandage and a second by Ms. Blackwell. Ms. Carpenter?
I would make an amendment, but only do it for 2 years. He said he hadn't had a chance. I'll give him a chance for 2 years to prove himself.
Okay. So Ms. Sandage, would you like to add that into your motion?
Absolutely. I love me some Miss Carolyn.
Anyway, like I say, said he wanted to have a chance. So I'm giving him a chance. So prove yourself to me.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. I'm going to open it up for discussion. If there's any other comments or questions.
So a 2-year contract, is that what we're saying?
Mm-hmm. And he said he wanted to prove himself, so I say prove yourself to
But if
me.
it's going to be that firm, do we have one contract that encompaces everything, or are we going to continue
Well,
to have
yeah,
two separate
because they
contracts?
already had the construction.
Right, but how would that work? You're going to
just put everything together. From what I understand, we've had no problems. I think the main thing.
Okay, wait a minute.
Oh, okay.
I want comments and questions.
Oh, okay.
Okay, well, that's
You
my-
audience
that's my-
is
that's
not
my
going to be able to
question
hear
is-
this conversation. So
Because currently they have a contract with us that's separate from this. Are we going to can we combine the two?
Okay, that's your question. Ms. Carpenter, is that good with you?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay,
You
so
know,
I need Mr. White, if you and Mr. Vogel could come back to the podium, please. Hearing that discussion and that question, can you respond?
That could be part of the contract. We would have one contract with the firm. Yes, sir.
Is 2 years?
2 years is
Ms.
fine.
Carpenter's recommended.
We can do that.
Okay, so that's okay with you?
We would serve at your leisure.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, anything else by any other board member who has not had a turn to speak? Ms. Adcock? Mr. Furr?
I'm good.
Ms. Blackwell? Okay. Mr. Walter, do you have anything else? Okay. Ms. Carpenter, do you have anything else?
No.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor, and I have by Ms. Sandage and a second by Ms. Blackwell to enter into a contract for a term period of 2 years with Hartzell, Williams, and Vogel for our legal services contract. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Okay, thank you. And thank you for joining us tonight to both firms. We appreciate that. And with that, I will say good night to our viewing audience, and I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. I have a motion by Ms. Sandage and
Did
a
we want
second
to
by,
talk about the change meeting dates?
that's for us, and a second by Ms. Blackwell. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Thank you. And with that, we'll say good night to our viewing audience. Our next meeting is Monday, June the 14th for our business session. Thank you.